I want to thank everyone with the Muslim Community Center of the East Bay for arranging this on pretty short notice. I spoke yesterday for the Muslim Community Center in Sacramento, and it's a great privilege to have this chance to meet with you. I have prepared a handout for you. The handout is online now, but you don't need it now. And I would encourage you not to pull it up now. Because it is 15 pages. It is single-spaced. It is not designed for a phone. It's designed for a laptop or larger screen. The handout has all the main points at the top to save you the trouble of taking notes. And also the citations. I'm going to be rattling off many scholarly citations, lots of research. This is an evidence-based talk, so there's lots of evidence. Those citations are all in the handout if you'd like to look up the primary sources, which I always encourage. The handout is my name, leonardsax.com/mcc.pdf. It is case sensitive, it is all lowercase, and you must include the www in the .pdf. And I'll give you this link again. I just want you to know that the handout is up there so that you don't have to be taking a lot of notes. All right, I want to begin this morning with a quiz question for you. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and indicate what you believe is the correct answer to this question. This question is based on a longitudinal cohort study. That means a study in which researchers recruited a lot of kids and followed them through childhood, through adolescence, and into adulthood. When each of these kids was 12 years old, they brought them in for a full-day psychological assessment to quantify for each of these kids their openness to new ideas. Working with the school, you get the grades at school. If you have a full-day psychological assessment, you can quantify this kid's emotional stability. That's what psychologists do. You can accurately assess how emotionally stable is this kid. And likewise, friendliness and agreeableness and self-control. You obtain all that information from an interview at 12 years of age, and then you follow these kids for another 20 years. So they're no longer children. They're adults. They're 32 years old. At 32 years of age, you track them down and you determine for each one of these kids their health, their wealth, and their happiness, their life satisfaction. One of the 5 parameters shown here, one of these 5, powerfully and accurately predicts health and wealth and happiness 20 years later. But only one of these 5. The other 4 predict one or none of the 3 principal outcomes, and they don't predict it very well. But one of these 5 predicts health and wealth and happiness. I want you to raise your hand if you believe that one key parameter is openness to new ideas. Don't look at your neighbor, they don't know. Raise your hand if you think it's grades at school. I do not see any hands raised for grades at school. We're going to come back to that point. Raise your hand if you think it is emotional stability. Raise your hand if you think it's friendliness and agreeableness. And raise your hand if you think it's self-control. All right, going to keep you in suspense. If you leave early, you will not get the answer. But if you stick it out during the afternoon, you will get the answer to this question. And I hope that you will get more than the answer to this question. My hope is that you will leave today with concrete strategies that you can begin using in your home to improve the odds for your kids. Let's start by going back 55 years. 55 years ago in this country, scholars found that when immigrants arrive in the United States from overseas and they do not speak English at home, they found that those kids were at risk. Children of immigrants who didn't speak English at home were more likely to become anxious, depressed, or disengaged compared to kids born and raised in the United States. And so a consensus arose among scholars in the United States that when new immigrants arrive in this country, they don't speak English at home, we should get them speaking English at home. Not as a matter of cultural imperialism, they said, but in the best interest of the child. Because there was very good evidence in that era that if you get kids speaking English at home and assimilating into American culture, you improved outcomes. They were less likely to become anxious and depressed than might otherwise be the case. And the first line in your handout, just about, is a monograph edited by Dr. Milton Gordon and published by Oxford University Press in 1964, pulling together this research, showing that becoming American, if you like, improved outcomes for kids living in this country. Now, I rush to the disclaimers. First disclaimer is that I am not endorsing Dr. Milton Gordon. I'm not suggesting that his recommendation was good. The second disclaimer is that I'm not suggesting that 1964 were the good old days. They were not. That era was much more racist and sexist than our own era. Every era has its challenges. But I do believe that you can learn from the past. And it is the case that in that era, a child who, if you like, became American and participated in American culture and spoke English at home and watched American television did better. In other words, they were less likely to be anxious, depressed, or disengaged, do better in school, compared to kids who did not speak English, who did not assimilate. That was true then. It is not true today. Today, the reverse is true. To understand what scholars today mean by the immigrant paradox, I want you to imagine two families living right here in adjacent homes. The two families are very similar in many ways. They both consist of a mother, father, teenage son, and teenage daughter. The occupations of the parents are the same in both households. The household income is the same in both households. The main difference between these two homes is that in one home, mother, father, son, and daughter were born and raised in the United States. And they speak English at home. In the adjacent household, mother, father, son, and daughter were born and raised in Bangalore, India. They've just arrived here. They do not speak English at home. They speak Gujarati in the home. Now, in which home are we more likely to find that the teenage daughter is binge drinking, or cutting herself with razor blades, or has been diagnosed with an eating disorder, or has been diagnosed with anxiety or depression? On each of those parameters, it is now many times more likely that the American girl has those problems compared to the girl who just arrived here from India. In which home are we more likely to find that the teenage boy says school is a stupid waste of time, or has been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, or has been arrested for street racing? On each of those parameters, it is now many times more likely that the American boy who speaks English is more likely to have these problems compared to the boy who just arrived here from India. Now, as you know, I'm a medical doctor. When a medical doctor uses the term dose-response effect with regard to a toxin, what we mean is that the more you are exposed to that toxin, the more likely you are to experience an adverse outcome. American popular culture, the culture as experienced by kids who speak English at home, is now toxic to children and teenagers. And scholars use that word toxic not in a derogatory or pejorative sense, but merely in a descriptive sense. Depression. When scholars first began to document this about 20 years ago, they were startled. because many of those scholars have themselves earned their doctorates in the 70s and 80s. They were raised on the earlier generation of data, showing that becoming American improved outcomes. So they were startled to find that that is no longer the case, that the reverse is the case. And so they coined the phrase the immigrant paradox, because to these American scholars it seemed paradoxical that becoming American and speaking English at home now is a major risk factor for bad outcomes on many different outcomes. Anxiety, depression, who's on medication, who's getting the best grades, who's winning at the science fairs, who's winning the spelling bees. Immigrant children who do not speak English at home now do much better than American kids on all these parameters. Grades at school, participation in the science fair, winning the spelling bee, not being anxious, not being depressed, not being disengaged from school. You are now better off being an immigrant child who does not speak English at home than you are being an American kid born and raised in the United States. That is now a large effect. 2 pages of your handout consists of those citations documenting this one point, because I think it's very important. I put those 2 pages of citations at the end of the handout. And this yields the first practical suggestion. Again, this talk today is not intended primarily as a critique of American culture, although it will include a critique of American culture. Our main objective today is for you to leave with concrete strategies that you can use in your home. So here's my first suggestion based on the evidence. If your first language was not English, speak your native language at home. Do not speak English at home. Ensure that your kids are fluent in your language. Do whatever it takes to ensure that your kids are fluent in your language, just as you are. Create social events with other families who speak your language so that your kid can speak your language with other kids and with other grown-ups. Connect to that culture. And this is an evidence-based suggestion, because in your handout you'll find many studies that show when this kid starts speaking English at home, bad things happen. If this kid is not speaking English at home, they are protected and outcomes are better. So I have done 8 different presentations for the Islamic Association of Greater Detroit. I spoke in Farmington Hills, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit. And after my talk, a mother and father came to talk with me. They were born and raised in Syria, but they've lived here for many years. They have 4 children. They normally speak Arabic at home. But Dad told me that when his son wants to be defiant or disrespectful, his son switches to English. And he told me his body language changes. His eyes narrow. He slouches. He gets this smirk on his face. Dad told me it's like Justin Bieber just walked in. English has become the language of disrespect. What happened? Why did this happen? Why is becoming American and speaking English at home and participating in American popular culture now a major risk factor for anxiety, depression, drug and alcohol use, disengagement from school, and many other bad outcomes? And what can we do about it? And how should we raise our kids if we live in this country? That's really the central question I'm going to try to answer. One of the central questions I'm going to try to answer throughout the day. To get a handle on that, I think it's useful to begin by consulting comparative anthropologists. Investigators who have spent their professional lives studying how other people have lived in other times and other places. People like Gilbert Hurt and especially David Gilmore at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. And I spoke to Professor Gilmore. And I asked him, I said, talk to me about cultures that last. Cultures that have been around for thousands of years. Is there anything that they all have in common? Well, if you ask that question in terms of what they eat, or what they're not allowed to eat, or what they drink, or what clothes they wear, or what their religious beliefs are, the answer is no. On those parameters, there's nothing that all enduring cultures share. Let's consider the Navajo, the native people of the American Southwest, and let's contrast them with Orthodox Jews. These are two cultures that have been around for thousands of years. They're still with us. We know a lot about them. And they have nothing in common on the parameters I just mentioned in terms of what they eat, what they don't eat, how they dress, or what their religious beliefs are. The religious beliefs in particular could not be more opposite. But there is one thing they share. One thing the anthropologists tell us that all enduring cultures share. And that is strong bonds of respect across generations. So that's a photograph of Kenneldon. Now, if you know only a little about the Navajo, and someone asks you, what's Kenneldon? What does that word mean? You might say, well, it's a rite of passage. When a Navajo girl has her first menstrual period, she stays in the home of her grandmother for 4 days and 4 nights, and during those 4 days and nights, all of her adult female relatives call on her, and she demonstrates to them that she has indeed mastered the arts and crafts of Kenneldon. The arts and crafts that are taught by Navajo women to Navajo girls, and only to girls, and not to boys. And that's true enough, as far as it goes. But it's more than a rite of passage. It is a process that's been going on usually 2, 3, 4 years by the time this girl actually gets her menstrual period. And incidentally, this is not primarily about mother-daughter. Mom traditionally does not play much role. It's the grandmothers and the women of the grandmothers' generation who take the lead. And that's a common, although not a universal feature of enduring cultures, that the grandmothers play a big role. You have a community of women for girls, and a community of men for boys. Now, many of you have heard of Bar Mitzvah, but if you're not connected to anyone in the Orthodox Jewish community, you may not know that every aspect of religious life in the Orthodox Jewish community is single-sex. The men and boys worship here, there's a barrier, the women and girls worship over there. Every Saturday in an Orthodox synagogue, you read a particular portion from the 5 books of Moses. When you finish that cycle, finish the last chapter of Deuteronomy, and now you're starting over with Genesis 1, that night all the men, and only the men, stay up traditionally dusk till dawn, singing and dancing. You have older men with younger men with boys. You have a community of men teaching each boy, this is what it means to be a Jewish man. That's not that boy's father, it's another man in the synagogue. You have a community of women teaching each girl, this is what it means to be a Jewish woman. Now what that Jewish girl is learning is very different from what the Navajo girl is learning. There's almost no overlap in the content. The process is the same. In every enduring culture, you have a community of women for girls, you have a community of men for boys, and you have strong bonds across generations. That's what the anthropologists teach us. And we used to do that too. By we, throughout today, when I say we or us, I'm referring to Americans who speak English at home. This is not nostalgia, and it's not a guess. You have scholars like Robert Putnam at Harvard, who has spent more than 20 years leading an army of graduate students across the United States, conducting more than 200,000 structured interviews, documenting If 50 years ago, you could go into almost any American neighborhood and you'd find a sewing circle, organized not by kin relation, but by geographic proximity, which is a fancy way of saying that the women and girls in this sewing circle were not related to one another, they just happened to live on the same block. He documents not only formal but also informal associations. So he and his students take up a photograph of some men and boys working under the hood of a car in Lake Forest, Illinois in June 1968. And he and his students dig up, all right, who were those men and boys in that photograph? What were their names? How old were they? Well, you find that there were older men, younger men, and boys all working on this car. You could drive around an American neighborhood today on a Saturday afternoon, and you just might find two old geezers working under the hood of their '65 Corvette. But the boys are not with them. The boys are more likely indoors playing video games. Bowling used to be more common in the United States, but more importantly, from Dr. Putnam's perspective, it was done differently. 50 years ago, most of the bowling in the United States was in bowling leagues. And Tuesday night might be the women's night, and Thursday night was the men's night. And again, his students dig up, all right, who was in the bowling league in Shaker Heights, Ohio in November of 1969? Well, let's see, on this team, there was a 53-year-old woman alone. But instead of this 17-year-old girl going bowling with a community of women, she's going bowling with a bunch of 17-year-olds, girls and boys mixed together, which as far as Dr. Putnam is concerned, is bowling alone. When Dr. Putnam uses the word community, he means bonds across generations. And the bonds across generations have been broken. So, American culture used to be a healthy and nurturing culture for children and teens. Kids who participated in it did well. It is now a toxic culture. Kids who participate in it are at great risk compared to kids who do not. We're trying to understand why that is so. One part of the answer is the breaking of bonds across generations. That is only one out of 5 factors that we will continue to consider today. A second factor we learned from the work of Dr. James Pullman. Years ago, Dr. Pullman was a sociologist at Johns Hopkins University, and he also led graduate students across the United States conducting structured interviews with American teens. And one question that he would always ask, he would ask American teens, if all your friends wanted you to join a particular club, but one of your parents did not approve, would you still join? And in that era, the majority of American teens told Dr. Pullman they would not join because the opinion of their parents mattered more than the combined opinion of all their peers. They cared more about what their parents thought than about what their peers thought. I have posed an updated version of this question to teenagers in California, from Chico to the Bay Area to Los Angeles down to San Diego and across the United States. I've asked them, if all your friends wanted you to sign up for a particular social media site, would you consult your parents first? And the most common answer I get from American teens is not yes or no, it's laughter. They burst out into laughter. As one girl said, my parents would probably think Ask FM is some kind of radio station. You know, why would I ask them? These kids may say they love their parents, but the opinion of their same age peers matters more. They care more about what their same age peers think than what their parents think. Most cultures have been characterized by strong attachments across generations, and kids have been looking to the grown-ups for guidance. Boys want to be men, girls want to be women. And they're looking for guidance about what does that mean. But today, American kids increasingly are looking to the marketplace, and their primary attachment is to same-age peers rather than to parents. That is a robust empirical finding. It matters because good parents offer unconditional affection, but peers do not. Good parents nurture, but peers cannot. Good parents sacrifice for their kids, but peers rarely do so for their same-age friends. So that's a photograph of my daughter, Sarah, showing you a snake she found in her backyard. Suppose she were to say to me, "I hate you. I never want to talk to you ever again as long as I live." She's never said that, but suppose she did say that. Well, there would be consequences that her mother and I would discuss and decide what privileges she would lose and for how long as a result of that outburst. But nothing fundamental would change. She would not lose her place in our home. We would not stop loving her. There's nothing that she could do or say that could cause us to stop loving her. And so she can rest. She can relax. Because we are her primary attachment. Because she cares more about what we think than what her friends think. When the parent-child relationship is the primary attachment, as it should be, kids relax, knowing that no matter what, their life, their self-concept is on a solid foundation. It will not change. But if your primary attachment is to your same-age peers, if you care more about what your peers think than about what your parents think, then you cannot relax. Because peer relations are contingent and ephemeral. That's a fancy way of saying that they can change overnight depending on what you do. And every kid knows it. You want to see an American teenage girl have a total meltdown? Take her phone from her without warning, and she will totally freak out. She'll be like, "Vanessa doesn't know I don't have my phone. What happens if she texts me and I don't answer? She's going to think I'm ignoring her. She's going to think I don't like her." You can go from being the most popular girl to being the odd girl out in one day, in 5 minutes, and they all know it. So they're all glued to their phones at every possible moment, many of them, not all, and they're anxious. If your self-concept and your happiness depends on what your same-age peers think, at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age, you will be anxious because your same-age peers could change their mind about you overnight. That's a second big change, also well documented in the scholarly literature. That a generation ago, 50 years ago, American kids' primary attachment was to their parents. Today, for most American kids who speak English at home, their primary attachment, their self-concept, the friendships they care about most are with same-age peers. That's a second big change. Third big change, the anthropologists teach us that enduring cultures are characterized by strong bonds of respect across generations. And that used to be true for us. Again, when I say us, I mean Americans who speak English at home. And that was true 50 years ago, even if the parents were lousy parents who never said a word about it, it didn't matter. If this kid spoke English at home, they were immersed in a culture that did teach it. Look at the most popular television shows 50 years ago in the United States. Shows like the Dick Van Dyke Show, My Three Sons, the Andy Griffith Show. The parents in these shows are consistently knowledgeable, competent, reliable, thoughtful, productive, caring, time. Not so today. The longest running television comedy on American television currently, The Simpsons. Homer Simpson is a bum. His son's an idiot. His wife varies. Sometimes she is wise and insightful, more often she is not. The only one of the four major leads who's consistently wise and insightful is the daughter, Lisa. But I'm not picking on this show. I don't see this show as a cause. I see this show as a symptom. I have high regard for the people who write for this show. I think they have real insight into what's happening. In one episode, you get to see inside Homer Simpson's brain. Homer Simpson's brain has three major drives: sleep, donuts, and beer. I think there's great insight there. If you imagine a television cartoon 50 years ago depicting the brain of an American man, it probably would have shown the entire brain as a sex drive. That was the stereotype of American men 50 years ago. They were only interested in sex. Not anymore. Now it's about sleep, donuts, and beer. I think there's real insight there. The testosterone levels of American men have fallen by half over the last 60 years. The sperm counts of American men have fallen by more than half over the last 45 years. In writing my book, The Collapse of Parenting, I reviewed the 150 most popular television shows in the United States. Out of those 150, only one show, often or even occasionally, portrays the parent as reliable, knowledgeable, and competent. That one outlier show is Blue Bloods. Blue Bloods, shown here, starring Tom Selleck. This show is an unusual outlier. This is not typical of American television today. This is one show out of 150. Show more typical of American television is shown here, Modern Family. The straight father in this show is consistently an idiot whose clueless, dumb antics are butt of the joke. We are expected to laugh at him. His three children are typically wiser and more insightful than their bumbling dad. If you don't watch the Disney Channel, you might think, oh, Disney, that's got to be family friendly. Bzz, wrong. The Disney Channel is a major vector of what I call the culture of disrespect. This show, Dog with a Blog, the father, supposedly a school psychologist, knows nothing about what kids want or what kids need. The talking dog is wiser and more insightful, always wiser and more insightful than the idiot dad. In this Disney Channel show, Liv and Maddie, the two girls are as different as can be. The one thing they agree on is that their mother also supposed to roll their eyes in disbelief at the ridiculous, clueless suggestions made by their out-of-touch, dopey mom. And this is characteristic of American culture. And many times, as a family doctor, I've heard parents say, so one mom was telling me about her 8-year-old and said, I have no idea where this disrespect is coming from. Talking back. He thinks it's funny to talk back and be disrespectful. I don't know where this is coming from. His father and I never behaved that way. And I tell the parent, turn off the Disney Channel. Turn off Nickelodeon and Nick Jr. If they want to watch TV, they can watch the Discovery Channel, the Cookie Channel, but not Disney or Nick Jr. And the parent tells me 3 weeks later, the parent says, oh my goodness, what a change. that talking back is gone. They were learning it from the Disney Channel. The Disney Channel is teaching kids that it's cute and funny to talk back to parents, to be defiant and disrespectful. It's a big laugh. Kids are not born knowing how to behave. They look for clues from the culture in which they are immersed. If they're immersed in the culture of the Disney Channel and Nick Jr., you will have a defiant and disrespectful child. In some cases, it's easy to change. Girls and boys are not born knowing what it means to be ladies and gentlemen. They have to be taught. And we no longer teach them. So they look to the marketplace. The marketplace has changed. That's Sam Cooke. 50 years ago, Sam Cooke had a #1 hit song. He sang, "Don't Know Much About History." He sang, "Now, I don't claim to be an A student, but I'm trying to be. Because maybe by being an A student, baby, I could win your love for me." He goes on to mention French, geometry, and trigonometry as subjects in which he's going to try harder to earn an A rather than a B. That was characteristic of American culture 50 years ago. That was a #1 hit song. 50 years ago, American popular culture, the culture of kids who spoke English at home, was the culture of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Simon and Garfunkel, Petula Clark, Aretha Franklin. Not anymore. Today, American popular culture, the culture of kids who speak English at home, is the culture of Eminem, Nicki Minaj, Justin Bieber, Miley Cyrus, Akon. Akon chose the name Akon to remind you of his claim. He claims to be a con. He claims to be a convicted felon. He claims to have served 2 years for grand theft auto in the Georgia State Penitentiary, a claim which turns out to be false. When he got to be famous, the reporters looked it up, and they found that, well, he was arrested once on a charge of possession of 1 item of stolen property, but those charges were quickly dismissed. He's never been convicted of anything, and he's never been in a penitentiary except to perform. American popular culture has changed from a culture in which young men would like you to think they're scholars working hard to earn an A instead of a B in geometry, to a culture in which many young men would like you to think they're convicted felons or gang members, even if they are not. That's a significant change. Bruno Mars. Reporters describe the Grammy Awards last year as the coronation of Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars got 6 Grammys, more than any other artist, including the Grammy for Song of the Year, Best Song. There's Bruno Mars holding up his Grammy for Best Song. Well, what was the best song of the year in the opinion of the Recording Academy? He's addressing a girl he appears not to know. He tells her, "I got a condo in Manhattan, baby girl, what's happening? You and your blank invited. So go pop it for a player. Turn around and drop it for a player. Drop it for me, because that's what I like." That's the title of the song. That's what I like. That's a screenshot from the YouTube video, which has had over 1 billion views. That's billion with a B. #1 hit song, enormously popular in this country. More than 1 billion views on YouTube. So he offers this girl lobster, champagne, diamonds, shopping spree in Paris, and finally offers to hand her his wallet if she will just turn around and drop it for a player, because that's what I like. He's offering money for sex. And this is the best song of the year, in the opinion of the Recording Academy. 6 Grammys. Let's imagine excuse me. Let's imagine a young man in the workplace who approaches a female colleague and says, "Hey baby girl, what's happening? You and your blank invited. How about you turn around and drop it for a player?" And offers her money. Well, that young man would be fired. Or if he were not fired, he would be disciplined. He would be required to attend a training on sexual harassment where he would learn that addressing a young woman as you and your blank is objectification, it is never appropriate. That offering a female colleague money for sex is out of bounds and never appropriate. But that young man might reasonably respond, "Hey, that's what Bruno Mars does in his song. And he had a #1 hit song and he got the Grammy for Best Song." How is a young man supposed to know? Men are not born knowing what it means to be a gentleman. They have to be taught. And we don't teach them. On the contrary, we teach them just the opposite. And again, by we, I mean American popular culture, the culture of people who speak English. The Grammys last year were weird. Janelle Monáe, famous American actress, got up and gave this little sermon. She said, "I am here to tell you that time is up for sexual harassment of any kind. Time's up for sexual harassment." And she got a standing ovation for her sermon denouncing sexual harassment. And then a few minutes later, Bruno Mars got his Grammy for this song. No recognition of the irony here. That while they are piously denouncing sexual harassment, they're giving the Grammy for Best Song to a song that is simply a celebration of sexual harassment. Money makes her smile. Not love or courtesy or respect. Money makes her smile. I have cropped that photo he holds up his arms in triumph. America is about violence, mindless, senseless violence. Now, if you Google the phrase, "What are the hidden messages?" in Childish Gambino's video, "This is America," you'll find over 1,000 videos that are trying to understand what is he really saying in this video. So in one of those videos, they say, okay, remember that scene where he guns down the 10 African Americans singing gospel music? Well, I'm thinking that's probably a reference to the killing of 9 African Americans at a church in Charleston, South Carolina 5 years ago. Because 10 is 9 plus 1, get it? And maybe it is. I am not here attempting a serious critique of Childish Gambino's video. I'm asking you to think, what is your 12-year-old seeing when they're on YouTube looking at the most popular videos, the most liked videos that YouTube is offering them, and they see this video for a #1 hit song, winner of the Grammy for Best Video this year. What is your child getting from that video? Your child doesn't recall the killing of 9 African Americans at a church in Charleston 5 years ago. Your kid was 7 years old then. They're not getting that hidden subtle message, they're getting a surface message. And the surface message of this song, when you watch this video, is that America is about sex and money and violence. And the kid will see that this video got the Grammy for Best Video. This is the best our country has to offer. And the message is that America is not deserving of respect. That nothing is deserving of respect. The opening chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, is titled The Culture of Disrespect. And in that chapter, I present the evidence that American popular culture, the culture of kids who speak English at home, is now a culture of disrespect. A culture that teaches kids that it's cute and funny to be disrespectful to adults. But not just to adults. American popular culture now teaches kids to be disrespectful to one another. It is common to find American kids wearing t-shirts that say things like, "Do I look like I care? I'm out of your league. You look better on Facebook. You look like I need another drink. I'll beat you. I have Wi-Fi. I'm not shy, I just don't like you." I have spoken to students across Scotland, in Edinburgh, in Perthshire, and in Stirling, and I showed them some of these t-shirts. And the kids in Scotland were baffled. They asked, "Why would you put on a t-shirt that says to the whole world, 'I'm not shy, I just don't like you'?" The kids in Scotland, that didn't seem funny, it seemed rude and childish. But American kids, immersed in the culture of disrespect, find this sort of thing funny. You do not find these t-shirts outside of North America. I was in Sydney, Australia, and I actually did see a teenage boy wearing a t-shirt with these words, different design, but the same words, "I'm not shy, I just don't like you." And I went up to that teenager in Sydney, Australia. It turned out he was an American kid on vacation. This is a uniquely American phenomenon, the culture of disrespect, and it is immensely harmful. So again, our first task this morning is to understand, how has American culture changed? American culture used to be a culture that was healthy and nurturing for kids in this country. It is now toxic. Why is that? I've offered 3 factors that I think are part of the answer. First factor is that the bonds across generations have been broken. Second is that American kids now care more about what other kids their own age think than they care about what their parents think. And the third is the emergence and dominance today of the culture of disrespect. Again, I list all this in your handout. These 3 factors affect girls and boys in roughly the same way. But the next 2 do not. Video games, as we will see, affect boys more than girls. Scholars who study how American kids play video games find that girls and boys tend to play different games, and they play them differently. So Fireball used to be big for American girls a few years back. Today, Candy Crush and Homescapes are very popular with American girls. When you ask who has spent more than 4 hours in the past week playing games like Candy Crush and Homescapes, you find that girls greatly outnumber boys. Most popular video games for American boys are Fortnite, Grand Theft Auto, RDR2, Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Halo. Average girl playing Candy Crush or Homescapes spends about 20 minutes in a session on average. Average boy playing Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto spends 2.5 hours in a session. So I often meet with middle school students and high school students. When I meet with students, the format is not a didactic presentation like this one, it is instead a conversation. I'll throw out a comment or share a slide from a study, and I'll ask the kids what they think about it. So throughout the hour, we're having a conversation. So I shared some research specifically on Call of Duty. And I referred to Call of Duty as a video game. And a boy raised his hand and he said, excuse me, he said, Call of Duty is not a game. He said, it is a lifestyle. And opened his shirt to reveal his Call of Duty t-shirt underneath it, and the other boys hooted and hollered and applauded. I've never had a girl make a similar comment about Candy Crush. Although I did see a girl wearing Candy Crush leggings, so maybe that counts. What is the relation between how much time you spend playing video games and how well you do in school? Well, researchers find that below a threshold of 6 hours a week, there is no relation. A kid who spends 5 hours a week playing video games does no better, no worse on average than a kid who doesn't play video games at all. Beyond that threshold of 6 hours a week, there is a linear and negative association, which is a fancy way of saying that the kid who spends 10 hours a week playing video games does less well in school on average than the kid who spends 5 hours a week playing video games. The kid who spends 20 hours a week playing video games does much less well in school than the kid who spends 10 hours a week playing video games. And I spoke to Craig Anderson on the phone and I asked him, why is that? And he answered with one word: displacement. Displacement. What does Professor Anderson mean when he says displacement? What he means is that if you're spending 20 hours a week playing video games, that's 20 hours a week, you're not doing something else, like studying or sleeping. We'll come back to that point later this morning. There's a growing epidemic of sleep deprivation in the United States. American kids are getting about 90 minutes, teenagers are getting 90 minutes less sleep a night compared to American teens 20 years ago. There's nothing inevitable about that. Kids, and I see this in the classroom, kids who are struggling to stay awake. The average American boy now spends 13 hours a week playing video games, and that is just the average. On weekends, and your minutes do not roll over. So if a boy goes 3 weeks without playing video games, that does not mean that he's allowed to spend 7 hours on a Saturday and a fortnight binge. No screen time until all the chores are done and all the homework is done. And that means no devices in the bedroom, no video game console in the bedroom. Researchers who study video games distinguish between rule-governed games and rule-breaking games. So for example, Madden NFL football is a rule-governed game. You're trying to score a touchdown. If you try to score a touchdown by going out of the field, up into the bleachers, and coming down in the end zone from the bleachers, you did not score a touchdown. You went out of bounds. The play is over. Need for Speed is a rule-breaking game. It's a racing game. You're in a car racing against other cars, and you start out on a street, but if you stay on the street, you will lose. You've got to take shortcuts. Taking shortcuts may mean that you drive your car through an occupied building, break down the door, drive through the building as the people inside jump to avoid you, and crash through on the other side, and that's what you must do in order to win. You must break the normal rules. And that breaking of rules is rewarded. So Need for Speed is considered a rule-breaking game. So in your handout you'll find links to several studies in which researchers studied kids who are playing rule-governed games, like Madden NFL football, and compare them to kids playing rule-breaking games. Again, you control for demographic factors like race, ethnicity, household income, family composition. And both these kids are spending 20 hours a week playing video games. But the kid who is playing the rule-breaking game is much more likely subsequently to be arrested for speeding or another moving violation. And is 3 times more likely to cause a car crash for which they are cited by the police. And yet the kid has no insight, no awareness of how much he has changed. You say to the kid, do you drive any differently as a result of playing this game? He'll say, no, it's just a game. I'm not going to drive my car through a building. He has no awareness that the game is changing. Well, on average, kids have no awareness. Although I was talking to a teenage boy who said, you know, I really have to be careful after I play Need for Speed and I'm actually driving and I'm approaching a red light and the light turns red, I'm tempted to floor it. Because in Need for Speed, that's what you do. You floor it, you drive through the red light, drive through the intersection. And he says, I gotta keep reminding myself, okay, this is not the video game, I gotta stop for the red light. So that boy does have insight, does have awareness. But researchers find that most boys do not have that insight. They're not aware of how the game is changing, how they operate in the real world. Scholars define a violent game as a game in which you must kill in order to win. All of the most popular video games for boys in the United States are violent games. So researchers, Greg Anderson and Doug Gentile, again recruited more than 3,000 kids at 12 years of age. And at enrollment, they bring the kids in for a full-day psychological assessment, so as to quantify for each of these kids to what extent is this kid altruistic or selfish, honest or dishonest, patient or impatient, gentle or hostile. And what video games are they playing? And how much time do they spend playing video games? The way to conceptualize this study is to imagine you've got 2 identical boys. They also had girls. Let's imagine 2 identical boys. And by identical, I mean that these 2 boys are of the same race, ethnicity, household income, family composition, and both these boys are spending 20 hours a week playing video games. And these boys are identical on all these psychological parameters. They get the same scores on all these psychological parameters. Both boys are spending 20 hours a week playing video games, but one boy, his parents do not allow him to play violent games. So he's playing Madden NFL football, NBA basketball, FIFA soccer. The boy next door, he's got his video game console in his bedroom. Parents have no idea what games he's playing. He's playing the games that are most popular with American boys, all of which are violent games. At enrollment, as I said, these 2 boys are identical. They don't differ on any psychological parameters. But over 3 years' time, the boy playing the violent games changes. He becomes more selfish, less honest, less patient, more hostile. Not after a week or after a month, but after 3 years. And after 3 years, the magnitude of the shift is large. After 3 years, this boy playing the violent games now differs from the neighbor boy playing the sports games as much as a boy raised in a violent and abusive home differs from a boy raised in a loving and nurturing home. And the fact that this boy's parents happen to be loving and nurturing provides no protection against this shift in personality. And yet the boy has no insight, no awareness into what has happened. So these researchers do a lot of really clever things in this study. So for example, at enrollment, when the kids are 12 years old, At the end of the full-day psychological assessment, the technician says, all right, we're all done, thank you very much. I want you to go out that door, exit that door, make a right turn, go down the hallway, you'll find the waiting area where your parents are. Goodbye, thank you very much. Boy goes out to the hallway. On the floor, there's a $20 bill. At 12 years of age, most of the kids bend over, pick up the $20 bill, and walk it back into the technician. And say, hey, somebody just dropped a $20 bill in the hallway, will you turn it lost and found? I'm sure they'll be looking for it. Fast forward 3 years. Once again, you do the full-day psychological assessment to quantify for each of these kids to what extent is this kid honest or dishonest, patient or impatient, altruistic or selfish. Once again, the technician says, all right, well done, thank you very much. Exit that door, make a right turn, go down the hallway, the waiting area, and goodbye. Boy goes down the hallway. Once again, there's a $20 bill on the floor. The boy who's been playing the sports games, Madden, NFL football, NBA basketball, picks up the $20 bill, walks it back into the technician and says, hey, somebody just dropped a $20 bill on the floor, would you please turn it into, you know, it's the funniest thing. Same exact thing happened here 3 years ago. It's like somebody here is just sprinkling $20 bills in there. The boy who's been playing the sports game, the boy who's been playing the violent game, the boy who's been playing the violent games, goes out in the hallway, sees the $20 bill on the ground, looks both ways, nobody there. Bends over, picks up the $20 bill, stuffs it in his pocket, exits the building. But when you say to that boy, have you changed at all as a result of playing these games? Are you any more likely to take something that does not belong to you? He said, no, I haven't changed. Certainly haven't changed as a result of playing these games. I know it's just a game. I'm not going to go out and shoot anybody. He has no awareness of how much he has, in fact, changed. And Anderson and Gentile wonder why. Why does the boy have no awareness? And they answer their question, and the answer they give is that we lead our moral lives relative to our nearest neighbor. We judge ourselves relative to our nearest neighbor. Turns out that boys who are playing violent video games are hanging out with other boys who play violent video games. They're all changing, but they are not changing relative to one another. So this boy is absolutely certain that he has not changed. He has no awareness of how much he has, in fact, changed. Some violent games are worse than others. And by worse, I mean that they push this change from honest to dishonest, from patient to impatient, from altruistic to selfish, faster and farther than other games. These researchers find that the worst games are games which employ a moral inversion. By moral inversion, they mean that in the context of this game, good is bad, and bad is good. So for example, in Grand Theft Auto, in order to complete your mission, you will have to acquire money and weapons. And you can get the best weapons by killing police officers. So in the context of this game, it'd be a great idea to sneak up on some police officers and kill them before they know what you're up to. That way you can get their weapons. That's the only way you can get their weapons. You have to kill them. Now in the real world, to sneak up on police officers and kill them just because they are police officers would be evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do. If you want to play Grand Theft Auto, you must play as a man. There are no female avatars available for you. There are women in the game. Many of them are prostitutes. If you get wounded in your firefight with the police officers, you can restore your health to 100% by having sex with a prostitute. Now, in the real world, to kill a prostitute to get your money back would be insane and evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do, and this is the second most popular video game in the United States. Grand Theft Auto. Lawmakers here in California were horrified. They said, "Are you kidding me? The most popular video game," at the time that this happened a few years ago, this was the most popular video game in the United States. It is now second to Fortnite. Lawmakers in Sacramento said, "Are you kidding me? The most popular video game in the United States is a game that deploys a moral inversion in which you get rewarded for killing police officers and killing prostitutes. A game which Anderson and Gentile's show changes personality, causing kids to become less honest, more selfish." They flew Anderson and Gentile to Sacramento and heard their testimony and wrote a law. The California statute made it a civil offense to sell not any game, but the worst games to a minor child, a child under 18. Basically, the California statute put these games in roughly the same category as cigarettes. Put them behind the counter. You'd have to show ID, show that you're at least 18 years of age in order to buy the game. And the California statute was signed into law by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is ironic. But the video game industry immediately brought suit, claiming that the California statute violated their First Amendment right of free speech. And the lawsuit went to the United States Supreme Court. And in a decision written by the late Justice Antonin Scalia, the United States Supreme Court agreed with the video game industry and threw out the California statute, rendering it null and void. In a concurrence written by Justice Samuel Alito, Justice Alito said, "I have read the research of Anderson and Gentile, and I share the concerns of California lawmakers and of California parents. These games are heinous." He said these games reward the killing of police officers, reward the killing of innocent bystanders and civilians, as the avatars rejoice as they shoot, kill, dismember their victims. He said the research is very clear. These games are immensely harmful, and no child or teenager should be playing these games. I agree with California parents and California lawmakers. Justice Alito continued, "Nevertheless, it is the ruling of this court that deciding what games children will play is not the job of the California State Assembly. It's the job of the parent." And I have included a link to the full text of Justice Scalia's opinion and Justice Alito's concurrence in your handout. Because you need to understand that there can be no law or regulation limiting the sale of video games to children in this country, no matter how violent the game, no matter how young the child. There can be no limitation because the Supreme Court has so ruled. It's your job. You must know what games your son is playing. You must limit, govern, and guide what games your son is playing. No video game consoles in the bedroom. When your son goes over to a friend's house, it is your job to call the friend's parents and say, "Hey, my son's going to be hanging with your son tomorrow afternoon. Will there be a grown-up around to make sure they're not playing games like Grand Theft Auto?" And if the other parent says, Hey, they go in the bedroom, close the door. I'm not going to waste my time chaperoning what games the boys are playing. Then it's your job to say to your son, I'm sorry, you are not allowed to go to that home. Video games are another part of my answer to the question. The question, again, is American popular culture was a healthy culture that kids flourished in. It is now a toxic culture that increases the risk of kids being disengaged from school. Why is that? I wrote a book called Boys Adrift. The subtitle is The 5 Factors Driving the Growing Epidemic of Unmotivated Boys and Underachieving Young Men. I'm old enough to remember when I graduated, I attended public schools in Ohio, K-12. And when I graduated 40 years ago, the honors assembly, mostly boys up on the stage. The recipient of the award for poetry was a boy, the editor of the yearbook was a boy, the editor of the school newspaper was a boy, the recipient of the award in English literature was a boy. Boys were greatly overrepresented among those graduating with highest honors. Not anymore. Now it's all girls up on the stage. At co-ed schools across the United States, it is common to find typically a 3-to-1 ratio, girls to boys among those graduating with highest honors. This is especially true of boys who are white, black, or Hispanic. It is less true of East Asian and South Asian boys, especially if they do not speak English at home. If they speak English at home, they're likely to regard academic achievement as uncool and unmasculine. It is impossible to imagine Akon, Eminem, or 50 Cent writing a song about how they're going to work harder to earn an A rather than a B in geometry, except as a joke. Why did this happen? Look, the fact that girls are doing better is not the problem. That is cause for celebration. But why didn't we level off at 50-50? Why are American boys who speak English at home not keeping up with their sisters? And I've heard this so many times from countless families in this country. One mother and father said to me, you know, our daughter's working hard. Our daughter's working hard, cares about doing well in school. She works hard to get an A instead of a B. Our son's a goofball who'd rather play Fortnite. Same parents, same household. Daughter's working hard, the son is a goofball. Why did this happen? Video games are part of the answer. They're not the whole story, but they are one of 5 factors, I guess. And again, when you're speaking to parents over 40 years of age, you need to make sure they understand. Because some parents over 40 are really skeptical that video games could be as important as I claim they are. But when you talk to that parent over 40 about video games, you find that when that parent is thinking of video games, they're thinking of Pong or Pac-Man. You have to explain, look, you gotta watch a skilled teenager playing one of these games. Or you just explain to that parent, look, imagine the best action movie you ever saw. James Bond. Except, instead of watching an actor pretending to be James Bond, you are at the center of the action. You're not shooting at an actor on a screen, they're shooting at you. In a James Bond movie, you know how it will end. They all end the same way. James Bond always wins, he never dies, and the bad guy always dies, never wins. Guaranteed. So, in a sense, James Bond movie is very predictable. You know that James Bond will never die. He is immortal. No matter what, he will not die. But that's not true for you. Playing that game, you most certainly can die. You will die. You'll probably die 20 times before you master the game. And you are at the center of the action. And if you've got a 5.1 surround sound with a 200-watt subwoofer, when the mortar round lands near you, the room will shake and books will fall off the bookshelves. It is immensely realistic, and for many boys, it is addictive. It is certainly one of the factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys. And this factor affects boys more than it affects girls. When researchers ask, okay, among American kids, children and teens who are spending more than 20 hours a week playing violent video games, researchers find in that category, boys outnumber girls by more than 8 to 1. There are a few girls who spend more than 20 hours a week playing violent video games, but very few. Boys outnumber girls in that category by more than 8 to 1. So this factor, video games, affects boys more than girls. The next factor we're going to consider affects girls more than boys, but this is a good pause for our bathroom break. I don't see any cards. We're going to have cards or pieces of paper. I don't see those.
They're making them.
Does everyone have a piece of paper to write down questions on? You do? If you do not, raise your hand. Who doesn't have a piece of paper to write down questions? Most people do not have a piece of paper to write down questions. Let's go ahead and just do some questions. Raise your hand if you have a comment or question about anything that we talked about so far this morning. Yes, ma'am.
So my question is for parents who have kids who are 14. Can we reverse this?
Okay, can we reverse this? And again, as a family doctor, I have counseled many parents. And I have advised them, get the video game console out of the bedroom, and I have seen the change. If both parents stand their ground, actually in the collapse of parenting, I share a story from my own practice where the son actually was in his 20s and didn't want to do anything, was living at home with his parents, spent all his time playing video games, was supposedly helping his father, who was a contractor, but really wasn't much use. The kid just was completely unmotivated. They destroyed the video game console and threw out the games, and he changed. For several weeks, he was defiant, resentful, and silent. But then he started to change. And his father, as I said, was a contractor and got a very high-end contract to redo this mansion of this wealthy family, including installing a computer-controlled high-end bathroom shower where you talk to the shower and tell it what to do. Dad had no idea how to do this. He hadn't really been forthcoming with the family that he's never done one of these high-end things. His son figured it out. And yet when I met with parents and the 20-something son a few months later, and the parents were like, wow, what a difference. He's stopped playing the games, he's engaged the real world. And I asked the son, what do you think? You think you changed? He said, no, I haven't changed. I said, would you still like to play video games? He said, yes. He still had no insight, or he claimed to have no insight, despite the fact that he had become a more interesting and a more creative person. He still claimed that if he possibly could, he would play the video games. Video games for many boys is a true addiction. And as you know, I have a doctorate in psychology, and I have been interested in addiction. Since I was a graduate student, I've counseled many addicts. And you go to a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, an AA meeting, and a man stands up and he says, hey, my name's Stephen. It's 12 years, 3 months, and 14 days since my last drink, and I am an alcoholic. He doesn't say I used to be an alcoholic. He says, I am an alcoholic, because he knows that he is still at risk. Boys who develop this addiction, that risk can persist. But I want to encourage you. I'm going to go ahead and share a story in answer to your question. Kind of a different perspective on that question. So I'm a big fan of Meg Meeker. Like me, Meg Meeker is a primary care doctor. She's a pediatrician in Traverse City, Michigan. Like me, she's written some books for parents. Like me, she tries to ground her recommendations in evidence. And she and I were on the Today Show talking about boys adrift, a growing proportion of boys who couldn't care less about school. This show is nothing special, but what was special for me was that I was 2 hours in the green room talking with Meg Meeker, listening to Meg Meeker. And she told me about her children. She has 4 kids, 3 daughters, and her youngest, Walter. When Walter was 12, she said, you know what, I've been reading all this research on video games. I have decided you're not playing any video games anymore. So she goes farther than what I'm saying here. She said, no video games, period. And she told me that Walter was furious. He's like, are you out of your mind? This is what American boys do. We play video games. It's crazy. She said, too bad. You're not playing any video games. And he was furious for years. Month after month, year after year, he was complaining. He was upset. He was angry with his mom. Can't believe you won't let me play video games. You are like the most deranged mom in all of Michigan. She's like, too bad. You're not playing video games. So he's working part-time jobs, earning some money. He turns 18. He says, hey, I'm a legal adult. I've got my own money that I earn. I'm 18 years old. I'm going to go out and buy an Xbox and video games. She's like, fine. So he goes off to college. And we were on the Today Show together towards the end of his first year at university. And he had just a few days ago called his mom and told his mom, Dr. Meeker, said, hey, guess what, Mom? I just got $400. Guess how I got it? She said, I have no idea. He said, I sold my Xbox and all my video games. He said, Mom, you would not believe there's all these guys at college who expect you to be really impressed that they can kill 8 aliens in 10 seconds in Halo. I'm like, dude, you can't even talk to girls. The human brain is so plastic. At 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age. As I said, I have studied addictions, read the research, counseled addicts for over 30 years. And one of the most robust findings in addiction research is that the younger you are when you become addicted, the harder it is to quit. That is true for every addiction, and it's a very robust one. Meaning that many, many, many researchers have come to the same conclusion. If you start smoking cigarettes a pack a day at 24 years of age, you will be able to quit. If you start smoking cigarettes a pack a day at 13 years of age, the odds that you will ever quit are lower than the odds that a heroin addict will spontaneously walk away from his addiction. By not allowing her son to play video games at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age, and by insisting that he do other things, sports, jobs, he's developing a wider range of interests. And now at age 18, when he goes to play video games, he can play video games and say, you know what, I don't need that. I don't want to end up like that weird kid who would much rather sit in his dorm room playing video games and go out and meet girls. I have talked to deans of students at universities across the United States, and they are telling me that the big challenge they now have is getting young men out of their dorm room. Because the young men would rather sit with their headphones on playing their video games then go out and meet girls or engage in the life of the college campus. Many of the traditional activities, the dances at American universities, have dried up and gone away because the boys would rather play video games. But I don't want to discourage you. Your question was, can a boy change? And the answer is yes. I have seen it happen. The younger the boy, the easier it is for him to make that change. The most discouraging email I get is from the parent who says, my son is not engaged, not motivated, working a few hours a week at the coffee shop. He spends all of his free time in his bedroom with his door closed, playing video games or looking at pornography. He is 32 years old. What advice can I offer that parent? Very difficult. My advice is evidence-based. I make recommendations based only on what I have seen work in my clinical practice or interventions which have been shown to be effective in the scholarly research. Once that boy, look, the brain develops along different trajectories in girls compared with boys. Girls reach full maturity in brain development by about 22 years of age. Boys don't reach full maturity in brain development until about 30 years of age. So that explains a lot, if you think about it. I use the analogy of baking a cake. If you're baking a cake, and you just put the cake in the oven, and you realize, oh my goodness, I forgot the vanilla extract. You can take the cake out of the oven, stir in the vanilla extract, and it will be a better cake. But if you put the cake in the oven and bake it, and now take it out of the oven and it's fully cooked, and you say, oh, I forgot the vanilla extract, and now you pour vanilla extract over the top of the cooked cake, you will not make the cake better. You will make it worse. That 32-year-old boy, his cake is cooked. There is no intervention which is reliable and consistently effective for that unmotivated, disengaged 32-year-old boy. If he's younger, then I go for addicts. So anyhow, let's take a 10-minute bathroom break. We'll resume here at 11:45 with your questions. Thank you. That claim is not supported by the research. The research contradicts that. It is not the case that boys who play violent video games are more likely to take a gun and shoot other people. That is not the case. Nor did I make that claim. I was very careful to point out the parameters where we do see a shift. Boys playing violent video games are more likely to become selfish rather than altruistic, impatient rather than patient, dishonest rather than honest, and hostile rather than kind. But hostile does not mean violent. Psychologists distinguish very sharply. Hostile person may just be silent and indifferent when a person is with them, or ignore what they're saying because they're hostile rather than kind, but they don't try to kill them. Violent is a separate parameter, and there is no good evidence that violent video games causes kids to become violent. You have to look very carefully at what the data is showing you. And if you read the New York Times, they ran a big feature saying, ha! Violent video games don't cause kids to be violent, therefore there's nothing wrong with violent video games. Psst, wrong. That person has an agenda. They want to promote violent video games, and they are deliberately misrepresenting or haven't read the relevant research. Violent video games have many bad outcomes, but causing kids to be violent is not one of them. I'm going to ask you to put the lights down, if you don't mind, so that the slides will be more vivid. One parameter that is well documented, but which I didn't get to, is depersonalization. boys who play violent video games are more likely to depersonalize other humans. For example, to agree with statements that there's no basic difference between a human being and a fancy robot. They're just both mechanisms. There's nothing special about being human. Turns out that boys who play violent video games are more likely to agree with that statement over time. My father-in-law served in the United States Navy, and he was a hunter growing up. So in basic training, he excelled in marksmanship. He was head and shoulders above all the other recruits. He was an outstanding marksman. And at the end of basic training, his superior officer said, Bill, we would like to invite you to go on for sniper training because you are such a superior marksman. We'd like you to pursue sniper training, which would mean you would get an immediate promotion and an increase in pay. And my father-in-law turned down that offer. Said he did not want to train to be a sniper. Instead, he was a machinist mate, working in the boiler room, which cost him his hearing. That was in the days before they had hearing protection. He is now mostly deaf. And I said, why'd you turn it down? I mean, if you'd gone for sniper training, you would have got a promotion, you got more money, and being a sniper is way more glamorous than working in the boiler room. He said, I didn't want to be in a situation where I might be called upon to take another man's life. There's great wisdom there. We've got a great deal of research on post-traumatic stress disorder. A man serving with United States Armed Forces in Iraq. His unit comes under fire and he fires back in defense of himself and of his comrades. And he pulls the trigger and watches a man fall. When you point a gun at another human being and pull the trigger and watch that man fall, it changes you. It doesn't matter if you do it for all the right reasons. It doesn't matter if that's your job. It doesn't matter if you're defending your own life. If you knowingly, mindfully take another human life, it changes you. And many of these men cannot forget the face of the man they killed. And it haunts them, even though they know they did the right thing. Taking human life changes you. It makes it harder for you to reintegrate into civilian society. Now that boy playing a violent video game, he knows it's just a game. But researchers find that that boy who's playing a violent video game, day after day, month after month, year after year, he is changing on parameters of personality in the same way that men who have killed in combat change. The change is not as dramatic, but it is unmistakably in the same direction toward depersonalization of others among other parameters. So boys should not play violent video games, even though playing violent video games does not cause actual violence. It clearly causes boys to become more selfish, less honest, less patient. That is a robust finding. And those are not things you want for your son. What you do, when I meet with the kids, when I meet with students, middle school, high school kids, I'll show them the research that what you do in your free time influences the kind of person you are becoming. How you choose to entertain yourself influences the kind of man you are becoming. I'll say if I'm meeting with boys. If you choose to spend your free time reading a book, you'll become a better reader. If you choose to spend your free time shooting baskets, you'll become a better basketball player. If you choose to spend your free time playing a musical instrument, you'll become a better musician. If you choose to spend your free time pretending to kill other people, you'll become a better killer. But that has great cost. That changes who you are. So be mindful about how you choose to spend your free time. Next question here. Video games have been shown to be useful for kids interested in medical school. Well, let's address that. There is a famous study which got enormous press, in which they studied surgical residents. These are medical doctors who finished medical school and are now training to be surgeons and are learning the technique of laparoscopic surgery. So in laparoscopic surgery, you're not looking at the patient at all. You're looking at a video screen, comparing the rates of psychiatric diagnosis in the United States with other countries. Kids in this country are now much more likely to be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, pediatric bipolar disorder, etc., compared to kids in other countries. So kids in this country are 14 times more likely to be diagnosed and treated for ADHD compared to kids in the United Kingdom. But among European countries, the United Kingdom is an outlier. Kids in the United Kingdom are much more likely to be on medication for ADHD compared to kids, say, in France. So I wrote a book for a French publisher, shown here, Pourquoi les garçons pépés, les filles se mettent à manger. You can get it at Amazon.fr. I wrote that book with French colleagues. The title means Why Boys Are Losing a Step and Girls Put Themselves in Danger. I don't choose the title, they choose the title. It's basically a combination of my books, Boys Adrift and Girls on the Edge, revised for a French audience using French data. And we threw out the chapter on ADHD. In Boys Adrift, there's a chapter on the overdiagnosis of ADHD in this country. Editors in France said, well, we don't need that here. And I said, why not? And they shared the data. In all of France, there are fewer than 6,000 kids on medication for ADHD. There are more kids on medication for ADHD in Oakland alone than there are in all of France, a nation of 67 million people. Because, as I've said, in this country, it is very common for doctors to say, let's try Adderall and see if it helps. And it works great. I did a presentation at a conference sponsored by Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The title of the conference was Learning and the Brain. And I would like to tell you, I wish I could tell you that my presentation, which is on gender and education, I wish I could tell you that my presentation was the buzz of the conference, but that would not be true. The presentation everybody was really excited about was a presentation by Dr. John Gabrielli from MIT. Dr. Gabrielli somehow got permission to put normal kids on Adderall and to withhold medication from kids with severe ADHD. And then to study the ability of kids in both groups to learn and concentrate and focus on and off medication. And he found that medication helps normal kids more than it helps kids with ADHD. That's an immensely important finding. For decades, the drug companies in the United States have claimed that these medications are specific, meaning that they help only kids who truly have ADHD. There was never a shred of evidence to support that claim, and we now know that claim to be false based on this research and other studies like it. These medications help normal kids concentrate, focus, and learn more than they help kids with ADHD. Such an important finding. So often I've been in a situation of saying to parents, I say, look, we've done a full assessment, and your son does not meet criteria for ADHD. And the parents will say, yeah, but then the doctor prescribed Adderall or Vyvanse, and it helps so much. The parents are interpreting the response to medication as though that response had some diagnostic significance. This medication was prescribed for ADHD, and it clearly helped, therefore he must have ADHD, right? Bzz. Wrong. Not a true statement. These medications help normal kids more than they help kids with ADHD on average. The response to medication has no diagnostic significance. All right. But who cares? This medication helps. Helps my son. He's doing better on the medication. And these medications are uppers. They elevate mood. It's not to like. Why don't you just put all the kids on medication? It's supposed to be a joke. Well, the reason you shouldn't put all the kids on these medications is because we now have 15 studies showing that these medications damage the motivational center of the brain, the nucleus accumbens. And you will find all this work in my book, Boys Adrift, the new edition that you have at the back there. The nucleus accumbens. Well, what's the nucleus accumbens? It's a little structure at the base of the brain. It's not part of the cerebral cortex. It has no role in learning or memory. If you damage the nucleus accumbens, the motivational center of the brain, you get a lazy boy. None of this is surprising to neuroscientists. The nucleus accumbens is where you find the highest concentration of dopamine receptors. What are Vyvanse and Adderall? They are amphetamines. Like methylphenidate, Ritalin, concerta, they work by binding to dopamine receptors. So it is no surprise that if you administer a drug that binds to dopamine receptors, you will change that area of the brain where we have the highest concentration of dopamine receptors. Let's try it and see if it works. It makes sense only if we know the medication to be safe. But these medications have very serious risks. So, this boy is doing less and less well in school. Grades going down. Another doctor prescribed Vyvanse. And the very first day that the boy took the Vyvanse, that afternoon, teacher called mom and said, "Wow, what an improvement. No idea your son was so smart." The boy, the teacher, the parents, and the doctor interpret the response to medication as proof that he has ADHD. But he gets side effects. Palpitations, loss of appetite. So they bring him to me. Parents bring him to me because they saw my article for the New York Times that I am concerned about the overuse of these medications in this country. They bring him to me for a second opinion. And I do a careful sleep history, which the child psychiatrist had not done. And I say, "Does your son get plenty of sleep each night?" And the parents say, "Oh, absolutely. He's in bedroom by 9 o'clock the latest, and we wake up at 6 the next morning. That's 9 hours. That's plenty of sleep, right?" So I'll say to the boy, "Do you have a video game console in your bedroom?" I say, "Of course." I said, "All right. Tell me about last night. Were you playing your video game?" He said, "Yeah, I was playing. I got an internet connection, so I was doing Fortnite, doing some Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, RDR2. Got to bed around 1 in the morning." Like most teenagers, this boy needs 9 hours of sleep a night. He's getting 5 hours of sleep a night. He's going to bed at 1 and trying to wake up at 6. He insists that he doesn't feel tired at school, but he is sleep deprived. Sleep deprivation perfectly mimics ADHD of the inattentive variety. There is no Connor scale, there is no Vanderbilt scale that can distinguish a kid who's inattentive because they're sleep deprived from a kid who's inattentive because they truly have ADHD. In both cases, you're going to find this kid is impaired across the board in every subject because he's sleep deprived. What's Adderall? What's Vyvanse? They're amphetamines. They're speed. They compensate for the sleep deprivation. So yeah, he does tremendously better when he takes the Vyvanse. But the appropriate remedy for sleep deprivation is sleep, not Schedule II stimulants. And in this case, I told the parents, get the video game console out of the bedroom no more than 40 minutes a night on school nights. And a month later, he's doing fine, off medication. Many American parents don't get it. They don't understand that one of their first jobs is to make sure your kid get a good night's sleep each night. And that means no devices in the bedroom, no video game consoles in the bedroom. Kids in the United Kingdom are just as likely as kids here to have a smartphone, but much less likely to have that smartphone in the bedroom because the parents won't allow it. Kids in this country often have their smartphone in the bedroom and they're using that smartphone and they're getting less sleep. So let's now shift gears. We're going to talk a little more about girls. We have addressed 4 factors so far, trying to understand why American culture is now a toxic culture for kids. The previous factor, the 4th factor that we considered, video games, affects boys more than girls, as I said before the break. When we look at who is spending 20 hours a week playing violent video games in this country, we find that boys outnumber girls 8-1 in that category. But now as we move to the 5th factor that we're going to continue to consider today, this next factor is social media. And social media affects girls more than boys. It's worth one slide to recall how quickly this has happened. 16 years ago, Facebook did not exist. According to Nielsen, more than half of American girls at 12 years of age are now on Instagram. Instagram is now a major part of lived experience in many American teenage girls. And it did not exist 10 years ago. Instagram was launched in 2010. To understand why this matters, and why this matters for girls more than boys, I want you to imagine a girl living in ancient times. By ancient times, I mean 1999, 20 years ago. It's the evening, and she's writing in her diary, by which I mean she's writing with a pen, in a volume of blank pages. She's writing about who she likes, who she doesn't like, the kind of girl she most admires, the kind of woman she hopes to become, what she really wants out of life. She might write 5 pages in an evening. She's not going to show that to anybody. If she's a younger brother, she'll keep it under lock and key. But she's doing some very important work. She's figuring out, who am I? And what do I really want? The great American psychologist Dr. Abraham Maslow said that figuring out what you really want is not trivial. He believed that many adults have not figured it out. And they're miserable because they're working hard at jobs they don't like in pursuit of goals that are not meaningful to them. She really wants. She's doing some important work. Fast forward to today. When I meet with middle school kids, high school kids, I'll ask them, all right, who here is on Instagram? Most of the hands go up. Who's on Facebook? A few hands go up. Who's on Twitter? A few hands go up. TikTok? A few hands go up. Who's on Snapchat? Almost all the hands go up. All right, who here has a diary? I just did this a few days ago with students in Nashville, Tennessee. In a room of 300 kids, 4 hands go up. All right, who here has posted on any social media in the last week? Almost every hand goes up. How about in the last 24 hours? More than half the hands go up. Who here has written in the diary in the last week? 2 hands. That's a big change. Scholars like Joan Jacobs Rumberg at Cornell have shown that as recently as 20 years ago, the majority of American teenage girls kept a diary. We've gone from a majority of teenage girls keeping a diary to almost no teenage girls keeping a diary. Why did this happen? It happened because kids are busy. They've got school and homework and activities and social media. And the social media is more important than the diary. because other kids are watching. So the social media has crowded out the diary. And then I asked these kids in Nashville, I said, all right, what's the difference? What's the difference between writing in your diary and posting on Instagram? And I call on Lily Faye, who's sitting in the front row. Lily Faye says, Instagram is public, diary is private. Bingo, that's right. Instagram is public. When scholars look at how American kids are using social media, they don't find any 5-page essays about what I really want out of life. They find photos, lots and lots of photos. American kids use social media to post photos overwhelmingly, more than any other activity. This is true for boys and it's true for girls. Well, who posts more photos? Boys or girls? Girls post more. How much more? 50% more? 80% more? No, it's 500% more. Girls post 5 times as many photos as the boys do. And the photos are different. A boy and a girl both go to a football game. And they both take pictures at the game. But the boy is taking a picture of the game, or the pretty cheerleader at the game. The girl's turning the phone on herself, and she's taking 100 selfies at the game. And then later that night, she's going through the 100 selfies and finding 2 or 3 where she's laughing and the kids around her are laughing. And that's what she posts on her social media. Here I am at the game, we had a great time. The difference between writing in your diary and posting on social media is the difference between living and performing. The diary is about living. It's about figuring out what's going on in your life and what you want out of your life. It's private. Social media, as used by American teens, is a performance. Now, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with a performance. A performance is a show that you put on to entertain or amuse other people. And I don't see anything wrong with that, as long as you realize that the performance has to come to an end. And you take off your mask and resume your real life. My concern, listening to American girls, is that many of them are trapped in what I've come to call the cyber bubble. Hyper-connected to other girls in this 24/7 world of social media and texting, but disconnected from themselves. These girls are hyper-connected to other girls, but disconnected from themselves. So we now have multiple studies showing that the more time a girl spends on social media, like Instagram, the more likely she is to become depressed. In longitudinal cohort studies. So in this study, researchers recruited teens and followed them over time and found that the more time kids are spending on Instagram looking at other kids' Instagram and looking to see how many likes they got on their own Instagram, the more likely they are to become depressed. That was true for boys, but it's a much bigger effect for girls. It's a much bigger effect for girls than it is for boys. So I met with Kathy Charles at her office at Napier University. Different cohort, different group of girls, different location, same result. The more time girls spend on social media like Instagram, the more likely they are to become anxious or depressed. And Dr. Charles stated that was a very large effect for girls, but almost non-existent for boys in her data. And she didn't know why. When I met with her, she could not explain the difference between boys' outcomes and girls' outcomes in her own data. So she was very interested when I shared with her research by Carol Breck and her colleagues at Stanford showing that girls are very ready to believe that other girls are having more fun than they are, that other girls' lives are more interesting than their own life is. This turns out to be not at all true for boys. Turns out that boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to other people. And girls use social media differently than boys do. So Vanessa gets a puppy, and it's a really cute puppy. And she takes 200 pictures of her cute puppy and posts a dozen of the cutest pictures on her Instagram. Here's my new puppy, isn't it cute? And I have some very sad news. Vanessa's puppy got loose, ran out in the street, got run over by a truck. The puppy is dead. But she did not post a photo of the mangled corpse on her Instagram. Boys do. It would not be unusual for an American boy to post a photo of the bloody corpse of his dead dog on his Instagram. A boy and a girl both get sick. They both throw up. The boy posts a photo of his own vomit on his Instagram. Girls never do that. Now put this all together. Imagine a girl, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age, in her bedroom, alone, looking at all the other girls' Instagram. There's Emily at the football game, she's having a great time. There's Madison at the party, she's having a blast. There's Vanessa with her new puppy and a cute. I'm just sitting here not doing anything. My life sucks. The more time a girl spends on Instagram looking at other girls' Instagram, the more likely she is to become depressed. That's a much larger effect for girls than it is for boys on average, and you now understand 3 mechanisms driving that difference between girls and boys. First of all, the girls are more invested in their posts. They post 5 times as many photos as the boys do on average. And if you don't like Jake's photo of the pretty cheerleader, he doesn't care. If you don't like Emily's photo of Emily, she's going to take it more personally. Boys post a much wider range of their lived experience. The dead dog, the vomit, the boredom. Girls post a much narrower range of their lived experience. The fun stuff, the happy stuff. This boy looking at Jake's vomit or Brett's dead dog is less likely to want to be Jacob or Brett. And boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to begin with. So boys are, to some extent, on average, protected to some degree from the most toxic effects of social media. I say that having myself counseled some teenage boys who are clearly being harmed by social media. Girls, the average girl, is more vulnerable than the average boy to the toxic effects of social media. The average boy, as we saw earlier, is more vulnerable than the average girl to the addictive properties of video games. Boys have problems, girls have problems, but increasingly they have different kinds of problems. Now, if a grown-up were sitting with that girl, the grown-up could explain, look, everybody's life is a mix of happy and sad, and success and disappointment. And that is true for those other girls, no less than it's true for you. But usually there is no grown-up in the room. I'm going to tell you your future. I'm going to tell each of you what's going to happen in your life. Here's what's going to happen. You will see a loved one die, and then you will die. That is true of every one of us. That is the nature of human experience. Life is a mix of happy and sad, of success and disappointment. All of us will encounter frustration and boredom. That is part of that human experience. Given that fact, and it is a fact, that every one of us will watch a loved one die and then die ourselves. Given that fact, how do you choose to walk through life joyfully? Choosing to walk through life joyfully is a choice. It's not something that happens to you because you won the lottery or got $1 million. It's a choice that you make. How do you make that choice? As a clinician, I've come to believe that how you answer that question, How are you going to choose to walk through life joyfully, despite the frustration and the boredom and the failures? How are you going to choose to walk through life joyfully? How you answer that question, I believe, at least in my experience, is one of the most important questions that determines how you will live your life as a mature adult. But this girl sitting in her bedroom will not take that first step, will not encounter that question. Because she still thinks all the other girls are having a great time. Their life is just great. She thinks she's the only one who is bored, who is frustrated, who is lonely, who is discouraged. So what do you do about it? What are best practices for parents regarding their kids' use of social media? Well, first step, you have to recognize most 14-year-olds are not masters at time management. So in one study, they asked this girl, how much time were you on Instagram last night? And she said, 40 minutes. It was actually more than 2 hours. But I don't think she was lying. I think she lost track of time. She's 14 years old. It is your job as the parent to help your kid develop good habits regarding the use of social media. I am not advising a prohibition. I'm not advising that you prohibit your kid from using social media. I understand that for many American girls, social media like Instagram are now a major mechanism by which they communicate with one another. But 3 hours a night is too much. Kids need to get a good night's sleep. Homework should be a higher priority than social media. 20 minutes a day is sufficient for your daughter to log on, read her messages, respond to her messages, and log off. There are many apps out there, parental monitoring apps. And screen time has a little clock that comes up in the upper left-hand corner saying 5 minutes left. So the kid knows they only have 5 minutes left on Instagram. They need to answer that message that they want to answer. Because once the 5 minutes are up, they will be logged out and they will not be able to log back in for 24 hours. And I find that some parents are skeptical of the apps. One parent said to me, oh come on, my daughter's just going to Google the phrase, how do I get around parental controls on that nanny? Well, we are in East Bay. I've done a great many events and workshops and talked to many parents along that peninsula from Santa Clara to San Francisco. We've even talked with a few people who write for Ned Nanny. And they've told me that Ned Nanny has employees whose full-time job is to Google the phrase, how do we get around parental controls on Ned Nanny? If they find that some kid has found a hole, they patch that hole, usually within hours, and your app will update. These apps work. You must install these apps on your kids' devices. Some of these apps have an option, sometimes called spy mode. Spy mode means that you can see what your kid is doing and they don't know it. Never use that option. That is terrible. Leads to catastrophe, in my experience. You must explain to your kid, look, this is my job. My parents insisted on knowing where I was at all times. I have to know where you are at all times, except now it's not out there, it's online. I will know every website you visit and what you do there because that is my job as your parent. Many girls are going to bed with their phones switched on. And at 2 in the morning, your daughter is getting a text. OMG, Jason and Sonia just broke up this really big news. We'll have to talk about this. Parents are amazed to find that half the 9th grade class is awake and texting at 2 in the morning. This is your job. Look, the rules of good parenting have not changed in 20 years. 20 years ago, a teenage girl could not accept a phone call at 2 in the morning to gossip because the phone would ring. And the parents would not allow it. Because they knew it's more important for a kid to get a good night's sleep than to be up for an hour in the middle of the night exchanging gossip. That was true 20 years ago, and it's just as true today. But today it's very easy for your daughter to accept that text because her phone never rang. It buzzed. She has it on vibrate mode. And she's not talking, she's texting. But just because it's easy doesn't mean it should happen. This is your job. At 9 o'clock at night, the very latest, you take the device, you switch it off, and you put it in the charger, which stays in the parents' bedroom. She can have it back tomorrow. Now, when you get home later today, and you inform your daughter that you attended a workshop led by Dr. Leonard Sax, and Dr. Sax recommends that you take her phone at 9 o'clock, the latest, switch it off and put it in the charger which stays in the parents' bedroom, she may not be pleased. She may protest. She may say, but I use it as my alarm clock. Let her know they still make actual alarm clocks. You can go to the store and buy one. They're not expensive. And now she may really get upset. She may say, but what if there's an emergency? Remind her that you still have a house phone, a landline in the parents' bedroom. If there's a true emergency, the friend is welcome to call the house phone. And you, the parent, will pick up. And you, the parent, will decide whether this emergency warrants waking her up at 2 in the morning or not. It can probably wait. This has to be your job. It is not reasonable to put this burden in the lap of your 14-year-old. What is your daughter supposed to say tomorrow in school? When her friend says, hey, I texted you last night at midnight, how come you didn't answer? Is your 14-year-old supposed to say, well, researchers at Stanford have shown that sleep deprivation in adolescence is a major risk factor in the etiology of depression. No, that's ridiculous. You can't expect her to do that. Her friend might be offended that she valued getting a good night's sleep more than answering her text. That is not age appropriate to put such a burden on your daughter. You have to allow your daughter to say, hey, my evil parents take my phone every night at 9 and won't have it back the next morning. It is your job to be the evil parent. At 9 o'clock at night, you take the device, you switch it off, you put it in the charger, which stays in the parents' bedroom. So I was doing this talk for a different group of parents and doing a Q&A. The father said, you know, Dr. Sax, I heard what you said about the importance of kids getting a good night's sleep and not being awakened during the night by their phone. I totally agree with that. He said, but, you know, my daughter, she puts her phone on airplane mode. So she can still use it as her alarm clock, but it's on airplane mode. And because it's on airplane mode, she won't be distracted during the night. And I said, how do you know that she keeps it on airplane mode? You go into her room at 2 in the morning to check. And this dad was clearly offended by my question. He said, Dr. Sax, you're implying that my daughter would lie to me. My daughter would never lie to me. I said, sir, I don't know you and I don't know your daughter. But I can tell you, based on the research, your daughter is more likely to lie to you than to anyone else. Because she cares what you think. She cares what you think. She doesn't want to disappoint you. She does not want to let you down. Don't put that temptation before her. It is unkind. It is unfair. It is not age appropriate. No phones in the bedroom. No devices in the bedroom. That's not just my opinion. Those are the official guidelines of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And again, you will find the link to the full text of the American Academy Guidelines in your handout, which say, no unsupervised use of the internet. There should be no expectation of privacy when a child or teenager is online. Those are the guidelines. Get the device out of the bedroom and into a public space, like the kitchen or the living room. So a mom consulted me and she said, you know, I agree with what you're saying about kids getting a good night's sleep and the importance of kids getting a good night's sleep. But my daughter's school, all the homework's online. And so she's doing her homework. She didn't finish it till 11:30, 12 midnight. There's no way she can get enough sleep because she's got all this homework. It's got to be done on her laptop. And I told Mom, get the laptop out of the bedroom and put it in the kitchen or the living room. And a few weeks later, Mom told me that the homework is done by 9 and she's in bed by 9:30. She wasn't lying. She didn't realize how much time she was spending on Instagram and shopping sites. And I want you to know I practice what I preach. My daughter attends a school, the Agnes Irwin School in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, where basically all the homework's online. So she was sitting at the kitchen table, doing her homework at her laptop. I was sitting at the kitchen table, answering emails on my laptop, and she started whistling one of her favorite songs right now, which is the Bach Little Fugue. And I came in on the second voice, and my wife came in on the third voice, and we kind of smushed our way through at least some of it. And it was a great little family moment. No words were spoken. Get the device out of the bedroom and into the kitchen. Scholars define sexting as sending or receiving an obscene photo. They define obscene as the nipple of the female breast is exposed or the male and female genitalia are exposed. Sexting per se is unusual, but provocative. Every study published in the last 4 years has found that at least half, more than 50% of American girls 13 through 17 years of age are now engaging in this activity, which some call not quite sexting. In your handout, you'll find a citation to Sarah Thomas, who last year published her research showing that the great majority of American girls give the boys these photos. The boys ask for photos. They say, will you send me some photos? You know what I mean? And the girls do it. First of all, because they think all the other girls are doing it. And secondly, because they don't know how to say no. They have received no advice, no coaching. What is a girl supposed to say? Well, I'm a lady of virtue, and a lady of virtue wouldn't do that. That's ridiculous. The role models, Ariana Grande, Miley Cyrus, who have millions of followers on Instagram, they're all doing it. All the cool girls do it. You need to give your daughter an excuse to say no. Not quite sexting. A girl posting a picture of herself in a bikini or half-dressed. Not obscene. So during Q&A, a father said, Dr. Sax, your comments about not quite sexting, you really seemed upset about that. I'm trying to understand why you're so upset. You explained it's not obscene, it's not pornographic, she's not going to get arrested. She's dressed pretty much the way kids are dressed at a beach. Why are you making such a fuss? Why are you being so puritanical? So puritanical, he said. And I said, look, this girl is presenting herself as an object for the arousal and amusement of boys. Scholars call that self-objectification, and we have a great deal of research showing that girls who engage in this kind of activity are more likely to agree with the statement that how you look is way more important than what kind of person you are. Girls who engage in this kind of activity are much more likely to become anxious, less likely to be academically engaged. So in my own practice, a girl I know well was asked by another girl. The other girl said, hey, how about you take your clothes off, I'll take my clothes off, we'll take some pictures of us taking our clothes off and send them to our boyfriends. And the girl I know said, well, I can't do that because my mom has installed my mobile watchdog on my phone. As soon as I take a photo, that photo goes immediately to my mom's phone and to her laptop. Go ahead, try it out. And so the other girl, the girl I don't know, took a picture and called mom at work and said, hey, Mr. Patrick, we just took a picture. Can you see it? Mom's like, yeah, it's flowers. Flowers in a vase. Gardenias? Okay, thanks, bye! And the girl who had proposed the striptease said, wow, that's amazing. I wish my parents cared about me that much. They have no idea what I do with my phone. And the striptease did not happen. During Q&A at another of these workshops, the father said, I don't understand why the striptease did not happen. They could still have done it using the other girl's phone that didn't have the parental monitoring app on it. So in your handout, you'll find citations to 2 studies of actual sexting. 2 studies in which American researchers interviewed American teens who are engaged in actual sexting, who are taking obscene photos of themselves and sending those photos to their peers. And the researchers asked every one of these kids, why are you doing this? The most common answer a boy gives as to why he is sexting, the most common answer a boy gives is that he's doing it because he really enjoys doing it. It is common to find a 15-year-old boy who really enjoys taking a photo of his own erect penis and sending it to a 14-year-old girl. And this 15-year-old boy is absolutely certain that the 14-year-old girl will be excited and aroused to get this photo. He doesn't know that this girl is much more likely to be disgusted and repulsed to have this photo on her phone. He's a 15-year-old boy. He's got a long way to go. But then the researchers talked to the 14-year-old girl who is taking obscene photos of herself and sending them to her friends. And they asked the girl, why are you doing this? And the most common answer the girl gives is, well, I wish I didn't have to. And the researcher says, what do you mean you wish you didn't have to? You don't have to. No one's holding a gun to your head and making you do this. And the girl says, yeah, but at the school I go to, it's just like part of your job description. All the cool girls do it. Why did the striptease not happen? I think the striptease didn't happen because neither girl really wanted to do it. And the fact that the one girl's parents had installed this app on her phone gave both girls an excuse not to. You've got to give your daughter an excuse. You've got to realize your daughter, if she speaks English in the United States, she's immersed in a toxic culture. The culture of Ariana Grande and Miley Cyrus, the most popular female celebrities, are constantly presenting themselves in a sexualized way. That's what cool kids do. That's what cool girls do. You've got to give them an excuse to say no. So I did this talk for a Muslim community, and afterwards had a long conversation with Dr. Usra Hamzavi, who is a psychiatrist. And we talked a lot about this, and she described how in her own practice, when she tries to talk to parents about this, they'll say, oh, well, I don't need to worry about that. We are Muslim. And my daughter is very devout. She has a head covering. She's very devout. She would never do that. The parents are clueless. So Dr. Hamzavi and I talked about this, and she wrote a paragraph for you, which she has asked me to read. These are her words. Dr. Usra Hamzavi wants you to know that the Islamic community is not exempt from these issues. Some aspects of digital media have become increasingly toxic for kids. Young people are not safeguarded just because they are Muslim. Parents must be knowledgeable and vigilant. So I then spoke for another Muslim community. And another Muslim psychiatrist came up to me and we had a very similar conversation. Again, she expressed her frustration. She's a child and adolescent psychiatrist and she's counseling parents. No social media. Recognize that your daughter is being pushed to present herself sexually. And again, the parents are saying, well, that might be true for your other kids. Not true for us, we're Muslim. And she said, Dr. Sax, when you speak to the Muslim community, tell them being Muslim does not protect your child from American culture. The parents must be aware and protect their children. So, I don't know if I have time for this next set of slides. I think we'll go ahead and adjourn because the next block is about a 10-minute block. So let's go ahead and adjourn for lunch. And I want to see all your questions, and I will continue to answer that question when we resume. But you...
Okay, so
I'm a huge fan of Imam Tahir, I should tell you. I first met him 5 years ago at the Muslim Community Association of the Bay Area. And he and I spoke very briefly just now. Of course, I wasn't able to hear him because I was speaking to the teachers. But Imam Tahir asked me to address the question that he was asked a moment ago, referring to sexual orientation and gender identity. So, as you know, I wrote a book called Why Gender Medal Day in 2005. That first edition had half a page on transgender. Then the publisher asked me to write a revised edition. And the new edition that you'll find out in the lobby has 12 chapters. 4 of the final 12 chapters, 4 of those 12 chapters are on gender nonconforming, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Because this has exploded over the last 10 years. Because American kids are now confused. And we have some good numbers on this. So for example, in 1994, the American Psychiatric Association estimated, they said transgender is so rare, it's hard to say with any confidence how rare it is. But we estimate 1 in 30,000 men and 1 in 100,000 women are trans. This 1994. 2 years ago, Time magazine had a cover story. 2,000 millennials, young adults, 12% of whom said they were trans. Now that's a very high estimate, but other more reliable surveys in this country are now finding 2%, 3%, 5% of teenagers who say they are trans. So we've gone from less than 1 in 10,000 to more than 1 in 100 in 20 years. What's going on? What's going on with all these, oh good, I got it. What's going on with all these young adults who say they're trans? This is not confined to the United States. We find this in the United Kingdom, is enrolled in the National Health Service. We don't have any corresponding database in this country. There is no one health service that every American is enrolled in. But the British do have such a system. So we got very good numbers from the United Kingdom. In 2009, 40 girls in the United Kingdom said they were trans and wanted to undergo reassignment to the male gender. In 2017, more than 1,600 girls in the United Kingdom said they were trans. They went from 40 to more than 1,600. That's a 4,000% increase in less than 10 years. What is happening? So I addressed this issue at some length in my book, Why Gender Matters, the new edition. Gender is more fragile than we knew. Girls want to be women, boys want to be men, but what does that mean? They look around for clues. And if this girl speaks English and lives in the United States and goes online, who are the most popular women on Instagram? Well, there's Ariana Grande, Miley Cyrus, Nicki Minaj. These women present themselves in a relentlessly sexualized fashion, posing in bikinis and lingerie. And this girl says, yuck, 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 yuck. That's not me. I don't want to do that. And she goes online, and there are now thousands, tens of thousands of web pages encouraging that girl. You don't like Barbie dolls? You don't like posing in bikinis? You must be trans. You must be trans. You must be a boy. We know a great deal about transgender. We have scholars like Kenneth Zucker, who has spent more than 30 years studying this. This girl is confused. She believes that if she can just get her breasts cut off and start taking testosterone, she will be happy. She is mistaken. We have studies looking at individuals who have undergone surgical reassignment to the opposite sex. After undergoing gender reassignment, these individuals are 19 times more likely than matched controls to commit suicide. These individuals who are confused think that their salvation lies in reassignment. If I can only get my breasts cut off and start taking testosterone, I will be happy. That's what these websites tell her, but the websites are false. They are lying. They are not evidence-based. This is a big concern. This is becoming more and more common. The evidence, the data, is being ignored. The ideology is suppressing the data. I am hearing from counselors in the state of California who say, who tell me, I cannot put in writing my recommendation to parents because I could be sanctioned. Because suggesting that this girl is actually a girl and not a boy can get me in trouble. I have to whisper to the parents what I really think. Because if I suggest that this girl is indeed a girl and should not transition, then I can be accused of practicing conversion therapy. And conversion therapy is unlawful in the state of California and is punishable by a loss of my license. My livelihood is at stake. Advising a teenage girl that she is in fact a girl and not a boy is not conversion therapy. Conversion therapy refers to therapies tested in the 1990s to convert a male homosexual to a male heterosexual. Most such therapies are not effective. That's conversion therapy, and they are indeed prohibited by law in the state of California, New Jersey, and elsewhere. But such studies have no relevance to transgender. Explaining to a teenage girl that you are a girl and not a boy, and that there are many ways to be a girl, and the fact that you don't want to play with dolls or pose in lingerie is not a sign that you're a boy. It's a sign that there's more than one way to be female. Saying those words can now subject you to disciplinary measures in the state of California. the authorities are now enforcing an ideology that is contrary to truth. So you've got a real problem. If you have a child or work with a child who believes that they are trans, you may have to leave the state to find a professional who is comfortable evaluating your child and giving you written guidance without fear of losing their license. In California, I'm hearing from many counselors, and this I'm talking recently, in the past year, who are now concerned that they cannot give their professional opinion for fear of being sanctioned by the state board. So we've got a real problem. And again, if you work with such a child or have such a child, I hope that you'll start by reading those chapters in my book, Why Gender Matters, because I present the evidence. And not in California. There is currently no such law in the state of Pennsylvania, so my license is not at risk for speaking the truth. But it's getting really scary. So that's one of the questions I wanted to, that Imam Tahir asked me to address. We'll get to your other questions later, but I want to get through our remaining slides. And I have reviewed your questions and we will address them, but I do want to get through these remaining slides. This session, I believe we're going to break for a bathroom at about 4:20 and then resume at 4:30 with your questions. So let's continue where we left off. Before lunch, we were talking about social media. We looked at evidence showing that the more time a girl spends on social media like Instagram, the more likely she is to become depressed. We talked about the way American culture is pushing girls to present themselves sexually and how harmful that is. So I want to share with you a story. Oh, I forgot to put in my clicker here. Sorry about that. Excuse me a moment. All right. So, visited a very fine school. Independent school, private school. Co-ed school. 12-year-old boy had a 14-year-old, 12-year-old girl had a 14-year-old boyfriend. He asked her to send him some photos. Nothing raunchy. He just wanted to see her take off her blouse and skirt to reveal bra and panties. Of course, she knew her parents would be furious. She didn't tell her parents. She went into the room, closed the door, locked the door, and did as he had asked. Took some pictures and sent the pictures to him using Snapchat. Snapchat claims that you can send a photo using Snapchat, let's say a 5-second self-destruct, and after the recipient has looked at that photo for 5 seconds, the photo will vanish from their phone, and if the recipient tries to save that photo using a screenshot, you, the sender, will be notified. She believed that claim. When I meet with middle school students, high school students, I will sometimes say, look, all you guys know, Snapchat claims you can send a photo with a 5-second self-destruct, and if the recipient tries to save it with a screenshot, you, the sender, will be notified. Raise your hand if you think that's a true statement. And some kids will raise their hand. The girls will raise their hand. Raise your hand if you know that to be a false statement. The boys all raise their hand. Snapchat is lying. They're deliberately promulgating a claim they know to be false. They know that there are dozens of free apps out there that allow you to save any photo or any video sent by Snapchat without the sender being notified. Snapchat, of course, knows this. The boys all know it. The boys have installed these apps. The girls don't know it. The girls don't want to save the boys' pictures, but the boys want to save the girls' pictures. So the boys all have these apps installed. The girl that I'm describing to you, the 12-year-old girl, sent the photos to him using Snapchat. He saved every one of the photos. School administrators later determined he did not intend for anyone to see those photos, but he was at a party, and he set his phone down to grab some chips and talk to some friends. He had his back to his phone. When I meet with middle school kids, high school kids, I say, if you have one of these, it never leaves your person. Separate yourself from your phone. You never turn your back on your phone. I call that basic digital hygiene. Well, this boy had never heard this. He never had that talk. He had stepped away from his phone. He had his back to his phone. Another boy wandered over, saw the phone, picked it up before the lock screen had engaged, found the gallery, scrolled through the gallery, found this girl's photos, forwarded each one of her photos to his own phone, exited the gallery, went back to the home screen, put the phone down exactly where he found it. First boy didn't know anything had happened. Second boy then posted every one of this girl's photos on his own Instagram. Within 3 days, everyone had seen them, everyone at the school. Boys this girl didn't even know were coming up to her and saying, hey Sonia, how about you put on a striptease for us? She had been invited to a 3-day ski weekend. The birthday girl, whose parents were hosting the ski weekend, who were paying for the bus to drive all the girls to the resort, paying for lodging at the resort, paying for lift tickets at the mountain. The birthday girl called up this girl and said, you know, I hate to make this phone call, but my mom is like totally freaking out because all the other moms are freaking out, calling my mom saying that if you're going to be there, they won't let their daughter come because then I think you're some kind of bad influence. So I have to uninvite you. I'm really sorry. I have to uninvite you. This girl had no psychiatric history. She collapsed. Refused to go to school. Hysterical crying, saying her life was over. Sobbing that the photos would always be out there with her name attached, and that's absolutely true. Other boys dozens of other boys had picked up the photos and reposted them on their own sites. You'll never get them down. Half the sites were anonymous. Parents took her to the doctor. The doctor prescribed Lexapro 10 milligram and recommended counseling, which they got. That accomplished nothing. Started cutting herself with razor blades. So you now have a 12-year-old girl with no psychiatric history who's now refusing to go to school, hysterical sobbing, depression, not responsive to medication or counseling.
No
Who's to blame?
could be found on the screen.
The girl? Her boyfriend? The other boy? No, they're kids. The grown-ups are to blame. The parents are to blame. Look, this is a very grown-up device. With this device, I can take a photo and send a photo, and once I send it, I have no control over who sees it or what they do with it. That's a very grown-up functionality. If you're going to put such a device in the hands of a child, a teenager under 18, then you are responsible for every photo they take and every photo they see. Journal, and I'm very specific in my guidelines. Based on the research, at what age is it appropriate for a child to have a smartphone, a phone that can take a photo and send the photo? Certainly, no child under 13 should possess such a phone. And most 13-year-olds are not ready for it. If you're going to give your teenager a smartphone, you must install on the phone parental monitoring software, the kind we discussed before lunch, and explain to your kid, look, I will see every photo you take. If I see anything inappropriate, you lose the device indefinitely. Or don't give your kid a smartphone. And parents will say, look, that's totally unrealistic and ridiculous. My daughter's doing all these activities. She's got soccer and computer coding. There are no payphones out there anymore. What happens if her ride doesn't show up? I don't want her going up to a stranger asking to borrow their phone. All right, I get that. I am the father of a teenage daughter. That's not an argument for a smartphone. That's an argument for a dumb phone, meaning a phone that can make a phone call and receive a phone call, and that's all it can do. There are many styles available. You don't know about them because they're not marketed to you, they're marketed to the elderly. I mentioned earlier my father-in-law. He was 83 years old and he lives with us. This is his phone. He tells me the battery lasts forever. He charges about every other month. It doesn't need 3G, it doesn't need 4G, it works everywhere. This takes care of the safety concern. Your daughter gets stranded, she can call you on one of these. But if you're going to give your kid a smartphone, you must install on the phone one of these parental monitoring apps that we talked about earlier, and explain to your kid, I will see every photo you take as soon as you take it. If I see anything inappropriate, you lose the device. And American parents push back. During Q&A and another talk, the mother said, look, I don't want to violate my daughter's privacy. I respect my daughter's privacy. If she doesn't want me to see her photos, I am fine with that. I don't want to see her photos if she doesn't want me to see her photos. I respect her privacy. I believe in privacy. And I said, look, Mom, the most important thing you must teach your daughter or your son is that there is no such thing as privacy to any photo that you share with a smartphone or that you share electronically. To make that point, I have found it useful to talk about General David Petraeus. In case you don't recall the story, David Petraeus graduated top of his class at West Point, first in his class at Fort Leavenworth, doctorate at Princeton, brigadier general at age 46. In 2007, George W. Bush appointed him commanding general. Then Barack Obama appointed him director of the CIA. You would think he would know that there is no such thing as privacy to any photo that you share with a smartphone. But somehow he and his mistress didn't get the memo. They seem to believe we're so smart, we've got our secure websites and our passwords, nobody will ever find out. Career over. More recently, similar story involving the world's richest man. The stories are different. David Petraeus, his app was hacked by cybersecurity experts. That's not what happened to Mr. Bezos. Mr. Bezos, founder of Amazon, world's richest man, sent photos of his own penis to his girlfriend, Lauren Sanchez, who then shared them with her brother, who then sold them for $200,000 to the National Enquirer. no hacking required. What's the moral of these stories of Mr. Bezos and General Petraeus? Well, I can think of more than one moral. One moral might be, don't cheat on your spouse. Both these men were married men when this happened. Another moral is, don't share any photo with a phone unless you're prepared to see it in the newspaper tomorrow morning. And you don't teach that by preaching. You teach that virtue by inculcating virtuous habits. By saying to your kid, look, I will see every photo you take. And if I see anything inappropriate, you lose the device indefinitely. This is your job. So I've done a great many events across Colorado. Fly into Denver, drive south to Colorado Springs, about an hour and a half, make a right turn, continue on another half an hour to Canyon City. Beautiful little town. Great place to raise a family. Far from the big city. We're all good people here. We all care about kids. More than 100 kids at Canyon City High School were discovered to be trading obscene photos that they had taken of themselves and were sending to their peers. They were using a Vault app. Looks like a calculator. You look at your kid's phone, see a calculator? It is a calculator. It's a full function calculator. But you enter your 4 or 5 digit password and the calculator vanishes and you have a vault of obscene photos. All the popular kids were doing it. When the story broke and the police launched their investigation, parents demanded the principal resign, which he did, which made no sense. Police determined that all this sharing essentially was going on in kids' bedrooms in evenings and on weekends. The principal has no jurisdiction over what a teenager is doing in their bedroom on a Saturday afternoon. The parents could not face the fact that the people to blame here are the parents. If one parent had installed parental monitoring software to monitor what kids are doing, this would never happen. Parents would have seen it immediately. The app will alert you to these Vault apps, and it would have been nipped in the bud. But not one of these parents, of these 100-some kids, not one of them had a parent who was monitoring what they were doing with their phone. If you take an obscene, if you're 16 years old, and you take an obscene photo of yourself and send it to your 16-year-old friend, you have produced and distributed child pornography. That is a Class 3 felony in the United States and speaks English. They are immersed in a toxic culture that is pushing kids to engage in this kind of activity. All the cool kids do it. So, did a version of this talk in another group, and during Q&A, a father said, you know, Dr. Sax, I really hear what you're saying about knowing what kids are doing with their phones and all the bad things that can happen when parents don't know what kids are doing with your phone, and I get that, and I agree with you. He said, but you know, I don't think I need a parental monitoring app. That seems a little intrusive to me. You know, I understand the technology pretty well. I'm a tech guy. I know what to look for. I'm checking my kid's phone regularly. I know how to look for apps recently installed. I see an app recently installed. I make sure I understand what it is and how it works. I'm on top of what my kid is doing. You know, I agree with you, Dr. Sax. You gotta know what your kids do with your phones. I don't think you need a monitoring app. You know, I think I'm pretty up to speed on these issues. He is not up to speed. He does not know that only legitimate apps show up under apps recently installed. We are in an arms race with the makers of these apps. These apps are designed to evade detection by parents, and this dad doesn't even know that. default apps will conceal them. When the app is installed, you will not see it. When you scroll through the various screens, it won't be there. When you look under apps recently installed, it's not there. You are up against apps that are way more sophisticated than you even know. Gallery Vault provides a dummy password, so if the parent should somehow stumble on the app and says, hey, what's this Gallery Vault? It's asking me for a password. The kid has created, which the program encourages you to do, a dummy password. So you say, okay, well, 1111, you enter that, and oh, it takes you to the pictures from the family reunion, and isn't the baby cute? He's created a dummy password that directs you to the pictures he's put there for you to see when you find the app. You don't know that there's another password that takes you to the actual photos. Gallery Vault has another nifty feature. Your kid's looking at the phone, you come in the room and say, what you looking at? Shake the phone once and hand it to your parent. Shake the phone once, the app vanishes without a trace. Shake it once. Here you go. Take a look. Just scrolling, just chilling. Just eat, not much, just chilling. Gallery Vault has had 10 million downloads in the United States, so has Hide Pro. Kids all know about this, but you are not up to speed. The notion that you can look at a phone, and by looking at the phone, you have any idea how the phone is being used is very 2007. It might have been true 12 years ago, it is not true today. The lesson of Canyon City High School is you must install one of these parental monitoring apps on your kid's phone. The people who are making these apps, they are on top of these issues. They are keeping up. They know, they understand the arms race. While Gallery Vault, Hide Pro are trying to conceal themselves, these apps are on it. If your kid's on Gallery Pro, or Hide Pro, Gallery Vault, they will find it, they will show you the photos that are being sent, and you can say, I'm very disappointed. I'm going to have to take the device from you. And you're giving your child an excuse to say no. And you're keeping them in touch with reality. Again, American kids are immersed in this toxic culture where the cool kids are sending provocative photos. Well, every kid wants to be a cool kid. Nobody wants to be the odd kid out. Imam Tahir said, your child is Muslim in America. There's tension there. Kid wants to be popular with the other kids. You have to give them an excuse to say no. Either install a monitoring app or give your kid a dumb phone. A phone that can make a phone call and receive a phone call, and that's all it can do. That's my conclusion from what the data show. Look, I've lived in the United States all my life. 20 years ago, there used to be a public service announcement that would come on American television. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are? And I'm sure some of you remember that, if you were here 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, the dangers, the gangs, and the drugs were out there. It was 10 o'clock and your kid was home alone in the bedroom, then you were a good parent. And many of us grew up in that era. It's 10 o'clock and my daughter's home alone in the bedroom, so I'm a good parent. But if she's got one of these, if she's got a smartphone, she could be uploading pornography. Your son could be downloading pornography. She could be engaged in cyberbullying. Your son could be a victim of cyberbullying. You've got to be a parent. And American parents are confused. So many of them want to be their kid's best friend. But a friend is a peer. A friend cannot command. A friend cannot say, I will not allow you to pick out an ice cream right before supper. Only a parent can say that. And parents are confused. They say, well, you know, I want to be my kid's best friend. I want to have fun with my kid. I have a chapter in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, titled Enjoy. Yeah, absolutely. You and your kid should have fun together. That's immensely important. Most of the time you spend with your kids should be fun time. And you should make time each week to do fun stuff with your kids. Because if the only time you're interacting with them is to correct them or rebuke them, that's not effective. You've got to have that foundation of all the fun things you do together. But you never forget that you are the parent and they are the child. A peer cannot say, one boy cannot say to another boy, I'm not going to let you look at porn. A teenage boy cannot say that to another boy. He might say, I personally don't look at porn, but that's just my opinion. Only a parent can say, I'm not allowing you to look at porn because it is degrading to her and to you. A parent can say that. A friend cannot say that. A friend cannot say, I'm taking your phone and switching it off and putting it in another room so you can get some sleep. A friend cannot say that. A parent can say that. And only a parent can say that. There's any number of kids out there who can be your kid's best friend. But they can't be the parent. That's your job. If you're going to give your kid a smartphone, you must install on that phone an app that I described. I discuss these, list these at greater length in your handout. And some parents really do get it. And one parent went a little further, did a little quality control. And she sent her daughter an anonymous text. Hey, hot stuff, I'm new in town. Can you send me some pictures? And her daughter responded, no, I know this is you, Mom. Please stop. Proud of you, honey. Keep making good choices. Love, Mom. So what really matters? What should our first priority be as parents? You know, until fairly recently, I think the answer to that question might have been a yes or a matter of opinion. We now have good longitudinal cohort studies that allow us to answer that question based on evidence. Again, longitudinal cohort study means that you recruit a lot of kids early in childhood, you follow them throughout childhood, into adolescence, and into adulthood. These studies allow us to answer the question, what characteristic of a child that I can influence best predicts having a job rather than being involuntarily unemployed, being in good health, not being addicted to drugs or alcohol. Turns out that whether you get an A or B in school accounts for very little of the variance. Virtue and character predict good outcomes. Character, conscientiousness, self-control, as measured at 12 years of age. How do you measure self-control in a 12-year-old? You don't do a marshmallow test. You don't talk to the kids at all. Those are not validated measures of self-control. You talk to the teachers. And you say, can this kid wait their turn? Can this kid listen to other kids and to grown-ups? Low self-control measured at 12 years of age predicts a high risk of poor physical health 20 years later. Low self-control measured at 12 years of age predicts a high risk of drug and alcohol use 20 years later. High self-control at age 12 predicts a low risk of drug and alcohol use 20 years later. These graphs are in your handout. And a low risk of poor physical health 20 years later.
Low self-control at age 12 predicts a high risk of financial struggles. 20 years later, this graph is in your hand. High self-control at age 12 predicts low risk of financial struggles. 20 years later. Low self-control at age 12 predicts a low credit rating. 20 years. What really matters? What should our first priority be? Working with children. It is teaching self-control, conscientiousness, honesty. That's not a sermon. That is a robust empirical finding. I devote 2 chapters of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, to reviewing every relevant longitudinal cohort study bearing on this matter. And every one of them comes to the same conclusion, that virtue and character predict outcomes positive, powerfully, much more than any other parameter. And the funny thing is that American parents used to know that, even before we had these studies. American parents, 20 years ago, it would have been common to find an American parent who said something like, hey, I'd rather you get a C on the test honestly than cheat and get an A. Today it's unusual to hear a parent say that. Today it's much more common for American parents to say, hey, you want to get into Stanford? You got to have amazing grades. You got to have amazing test scores. And there has been an explosion in cheating over the past 20 years, which I document. Parents say, you're not just competing against American kids anymore, you're competing against kids from Asia and Europe. You got to have amazing grades. This morning, I asked you to raise your hand to indicate what you thought was the most important parameter. And not one of you raised your hand to say that you thought school grades was the most important parameters. And that's right. But American parents now act as if grades were the most important thing. They won't acknowledge it, they won't admit it, they won't raise their hands and say they think grades are the most important thing. But they act as if they were. And if their son is getting B's and God forbid C's, this is a major catastrophe. And the more affluent the parent, the more true that is. So I practiced for 18 years just north of Potomac, Maryland. This is a very affluent suburb. And I vividly recall a mother who brought her son in to me to be evaluated. Again, I have a doctorate in psychology and I'm also a medical doctor, so I've done a great many of these evaluations. He's not doing well in school. He's getting B's and C's. Mostly B's, occasional C. And we did a comprehensive psychological assessment. And at the conclusion of that assessment, and I also had assessments done by other psychologists, I said, look, looking at all these assessments, on all these different cognitive parameters, he's performing somewhat, a little bit below average, around the 40th percentile. Pretty much across the board. He doesn't meet criteria for a learning disability or for attention deficit disorder. He doesn't have a learning disability. He's about the 40th percentile. And that's not an insult. In any group of 100 kids, 49 of them will be below average. That's not an insult to those 49 kids. It's just a reflection of what the word average means. He's at the 40th percentile. That's okay. Success in life is not a function of what grades you get in school. It's a function of virtue and character. And he can be a good man without being at the 99th percentile in academics. His grades at school are consistent with where he's scoring on his cognitive assessments. He has no psychological impairment. He is somewhat slightly below average, but well within the range of normal. Receptionist told me that Mom was steaming, furious, as she checked out. Below average, how dare they? We never saw them again. They'll go to another doctor. who will say, oh, well, Justin is brilliant. He just needs Adderall 20 milligrams. And we'll all see how brilliant he is. In this country, it is very easy to find a doctor who will prescribe medication. It's much easier to find a doctor who will prescribe a medication than a doctor who won't. And as we saw before the break, yeah, his performance will improve a little bit. We had a saying, every child in Potomac is either gifted, learning disabled, or both. There is no such thing as a below average child when you're talking to affluent parents. This boy's father is an investment banker. His household income is in the range of $20 million a year. My yearly income would be a rounding error in his annual income. When you tell very affluent parents that their son is average, they will be offended. How dare you say such a thing? And they will insist that you do something. And again, in this country, it's easy to find a doctor who will prescribe medication. They act as if grades in school are the most important thing. They attend a workshop like this, they don't raise their hand. They've heard that grades at school are not the most important thing, but they act as if it is. And actions speak louder than words. And there has been an explosion in cheating among American kids. So again, in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, I quote a survey in which researchers interviewed American high school students and said, do you consider yourself to be above average in good moral character? More than 90% of American high school students answered yes, certainly I'm above average in my moral character. I'm a good person. I'm above average in moral character. Then they asked the same kids, do you often cheat on tests? More than 80% of American kids say, of course, that's what you do. American kids now see no tension between cheating on tests and being above average in moral character because we judge ourselves relative to our nearest neighbor. As I said earlier today, understanding the findings of Anderson and Gentili in that interview study. We judge ourselves relative to our nearest neighbor. And the kids see all the other kids are cheating. I cheat less than they do, therefore I'm above average in moral character. They are immersed in a toxic culture that is teaching them that cheating's fine. You do what you need to do. What parameter, measured when a child is 12 years of age, powerfully and accurately predicts health and wealth and happiness? 20 years later, it is self-control and other measures of conscientiousness. Psychologists have known for many years that every human personality can be mapped on a 5-dimensional space. The 5 dimensions of human personality are conscientiousness and its subtraits of self-control and honesty, openness to new ideas, friendliness and agreeableness, emotional stability, and extroversion introversion. Some elements of human personality are hard to change, and personality does become more fixed as we age. But even young adults can change significantly on some traits. And it turns out that self-control and honesty are not innate. They are not genetic. They must be taught. You must teach them. How do you teach self-control to a 12-year-old? You say, no dessert until you eat your vegetables. No games until all the chores are done and all the homework is done. And if that has not been the practice in your home, I encourage you to make it the practice in your home. And if that has not been the practice in your home, I want you to sit down with your kid and say, look, we've been making some mistakes here. We're going to make some changes starting today. No more devices at the dinner table. No more looking at phones at the dinner table. No more TV on during supper time. No dessert until you eat your vegetables. No games until all the homework is done. And all the chores are done. No more video game console in the bedroom. No more smartphones in the bedroom. If that has not been the practice in your home and you make that announcement, there will be an explosion. And the older the child, the bigger and louder the explosion. But if both parents stand their ground after 6 weeks, not after 1 week, but after 6 weeks, you will have a child with better self-control. In most cases, you will have a happier child and a happier family as well. So that is your job. Your job is to teach virtue. Teaching virtue is not some exotic task reserved for the superior student with the superior child. It is required for every child. Required for every parent. Incidentally, if your child has a psychiatric diagnosis, never use a diagnosis as an excuse. Another parent said to me, well, my kid can't help it, he has Asperger's. Don't ever say that. I know all about Asperger's. We're not supposed to use the term Asperger's anymore. DSM-5 has replaced that. He's on the spectrum. All right, fine. He's on the spectrum. I get that. That's not an excuse, that is a challenge. Your child must learn self-control. The universe, the world, will not bend to him. He must understand the way the world works. Having self-control is a powerful predictor of health, wealth, and happiness 20 years down the road. And that applies to your son just as it applies to everyone else. I get it, he's on the spectrum. That means it's going to be harder for him to learn self-control. That means you're going to have to work that much harder with him to teach him. Never use a diagnosis as an excuse. The diagnosis is a challenge. All right, so it's your job to teach your child virtue and self-control. Years, I have witnessed firsthand of American parenting. American parents used to be pretty comfortable saying things like, do unto others. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's not a suggestion. 20 years, I have seen that command soften, morph into a question. And the question is often something like, well, you know, how would you feel if someone did that to you? And the mom has no idea how to answer when her son says, if someone did that to me, I'd kick him in the nuts and then I'd sit on his face. Jennifer Finney Boylan, regular columnist for the New York Times, wrote a column about enlightened parenting. The link is in your handout. She asserts that enlightened parenting means, and I quote, setting your child free to discover for themselves their own right and wrong. And if in so doing your child becomes a stranger to you, then so be it. End quote. That may seem enlightened or not, depending on your perspective, but it is not enlightened. It is a dereliction of duty. If you set your child free to discover for themselves their own right and wrong, and they live in the United States and they speak English, what they will discover is Bruno Mars, Childish Gambino, Miley Cyrus, Ariana Grande, mainstream pornography. And yes, they will become a stranger to you, but that's not in their best interest. What is childhood for? I mean, quite literally, what is the point? A 4-year-old horse is a mature adult. The Kentucky Derby is raced with 3-year-olds. A 4-year-old human has barely begun. And a horse is a bigger animal than a human. Why? What's the point? Why is human childhood so long? A human is a child or adolescent for more years than most mammals live. How come? Well, we don't have to guess. We have scholars who devoted their careers to understanding and answering this question. And the answer they give us is that childhood and adolescence are as long as they are because it takes many years for parents to teach the child right and wrong. That's a defining characteristic of our species. It's what distinguishes us from other primates, from other mammals. The New York Times recommendation that you should set your child loose to discover their own right and wrong is an abdication of parental responsibility. And profoundly unhuman, meaning it's not what humans do. It's not what's in our DNA. It's not why childhood is so long. It's not for kids to learn from YouTube. It's for kids to learn from you, from the parents. So, teach virtue. That's your first job. That's a bit vague, don't you think? There are many virtues. Which virtue should come first? I devote a chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, to my answer. My answer is, if you live in the United States, humility. Humility has to be the first virtue because it is the most un-American of virtues. And Americans don't understand it. American culture is all about walking tall and standing proud. Instagram is all about being awesome. So I was meeting with middle school kids, and again, when I meet with students, it's question and answer. So I'll say, what is humility? Raise your hand if you think you know what that word means, and you're willing to share your definition with your colleagues here. So a 6th grade boy raises his hand, and I call on him, and the 6th grade boy says, humility means trying to convince yourself you're dumb when you know you're smart. I said, actually, that is not humility. That is psychosis. Detachment from reality. I said, humility, let me offer you a definition. Here's one definition of humility. Humility means being as interested in other people as you are in yourself. Kids are all giving me a blank look. They've never heard this before. I'm going to light up the sky like lightning. This world will belong to me. That's not exactly humility. What is humility? So, again, speaking to parents during Q&A, mother said, I want my daughter to be humble. I want her to have high self-esteem. So when that big job comes along, she'll go for it. I don't want to teach my daughter humility. I said, well, with all due respect, you are confused. You're confusing being humble with being timid. These are not the same thing. They're very nearly opposites. And the virtue you want for your daughter is not self-esteem. It's not what you're thinking of here. The virtue you're trying to put your finger on is called courage. Courage means you know your shortcomings, your weaknesses, your failures, and your inadequacies. And you find the strength to push forward anyhow. The virtue you want for your daughter is courage. How do you teach humility? Well, one strategy, again, I talk a lot about this in that chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting. One strategy is chores. Chores is a very simple and useful strategy to teach humility. But again, affluent parents will push back. They'll say, look, my kid's busy. She's at school and computer coding class and soccer. And, we can afford to hire a housekeeper to tidy her room and vacuum. My daughter's job, her job is school. I don't want to waste her time. She doesn't have time in the day to be vacuuming. Her job is school. The unintended message those parents are sending is, you are too important to be bothered with menial tasks, like tidying your room. Don't send that message. That is a harmful message. And your first job is to teach virtue. Getting A's instead of B's is less important. Parents don't raise their hand to say school grades are the most important thing, but they act as if it is. They'd much rather their kid work on their homework than clean and tidy up their room. They act as if grades are more important than virtue. Another strategy has to do with the summer job. Again, I've lived all my life in this country. When I was growing up, I worked minimum wage summer jobs, and so did most of the other kids I knew. Not anymore. Today, middle income and affluent parents want their daughter, their son to do an internship and a rigorous academic program to have something put down on the college application about all the things they learned doing these programs or these internships. Waiting tables, that's not going to look good on a college application. I think those parents are mistaken. At the low-wage summer job, waiting tables, your daughter will learn humility. She'll learn about how other people live. She'll also learn resilience, because the manager doesn't care about her feelings. And the customer who's angry about the coffee doesn't care about her feelings. That's exactly the kind of experience she needs to become strong. Dealing with demanding bosses and crabby customers, she will become resilient. Parents think they're helping their kids, getting them into the internship at Goldman Sachs, or the selective academic program, summer program, the Stanford Scholars Program. But without these kind of experiences, working at that greasy spoon, kids become fragile. To do the right thing as a parent in the United States will require you to be courageous. You must have courage. Living here, when your one neighbor is boasting about how her daughter was accepted into the Stanford Scholars Program, the rigorous academic program at Stanford over the summer for exceptional high school students, and the parent on your left boasts about how her son has been accepted to the summer internship at JP Chase and will be at headquarters at Mission Street in San Francisco. And now they look to you. It will take great courage to say, oh yeah, my daughter's working at the Greasy Spoon here at Fisherman's Wharf. That will take courage. But you're doing the right thing. Because your daughter's experience working at the Greasy Spoon for minimum wage and tips will build character. And it's much less likely to be true at JP Chase, where what your son is going to learn is that making lots of money is the most important thing. It's not the message you want to send. But across the United States, I find that schools are systematically puffing up self-esteem, indoctrinating kids. I was in an American elementary school, third grade classroom. The assignment was to write your name on a white piece of paper and attach to your name 5 adjectives describing how amazing you are. And Mateo here has written a genius, misspelled, excellent, misspelled, talented, awesome, and marvelous. I'm not picking on Mateo, he's just doing the assignment. There's no awareness on the part of the teacher of how puffing up self-esteem leads to narcissism. Again, the self-esteem movement in this country going back to the 70s and 80s, all good intentions. Educators believe that by building up self-esteem, we build up self-concept and self-confidence, advocacy, no awareness that puffing up self-esteem, you're special because you're you, leads to narcissism. That's an empirical finding. Nobody predicted that 40 years ago. That is what researchers are now discovering. That the kid with highest self-esteem in the United States is the kid most likely to be narcissistic. Narcissistic means he thinks he's more special than anybody else. That was an unintended consequence of this culture of puffing up self-esteem. And the longitudinal cohort studies show us that the kid with highest self-esteem is the one most likely 10 years down the road to be resentful. Because if I'm so amazing, how come I'm not rich and famous? In my own practice, I can tell you about a 15-year-old girl who wanted to be a writer of fiction. And she wrote a short story, and her teacher wrote on the story, "You have a spark of the divine fire, A++. That's high praise indeed. And her parents told her she was going to be a great writer, and her teachers are telling her she's going to be a great writer. Well, I can tell you how the story ends 9 years later. She's now 24, she's written 2 novels, she can't get a publisher, she can't even get an agent. Working for a low wage in a cubicle, watching the Today Show. They're interviewing a woman younger than her, and this younger woman is talking about her novel, which is a bestseller. And this young woman is seething with resentment. If I'm so great, how come I didn't get my chance? Why am I not on the Today Show? The longitudinal cohort studies show us that the teenager who has the highest self-esteem is the teenager most likely to be resentful 10 years down the road. Because I'm not rich and famous. Conversely, the teenager who scores highest on humility is the teenager most likely to be happy and content 10 years down the road. Humility leads to happiness and contentment. Bloated self-esteem leads to narcissism and resentment. That's the empirical finding that I defend over 2 chapters in my book, In the Collapse of Parenting. You want to teach your kid humility. Also, in that chapter, you'll find I describe research by scholars at UCLA who looked at the most popular television shows in the United States, 1967 through 2007. And they found great consistency, 1967 through 1997, in terms of what these shows were teaching on 16 parameters, and they ranked them in importance, how the show ranked them in importance. And they found that from 1967 through 1997, there was great consistency in American popular television in terms of what the show was teaching. The show was teaching that the most important thing is to do the right thing, to be a good friend, to be liked for the right reasons. Being famous, that's the least important thing. My daughter and I have watched every episode from the Andy Griffith Show. 241 episodes over 8 seasons. They're all free if you're Amazon Prime. In one of the later seasons, there are 2 adult leads and 1 child lead. Opie is the child. And the adult leads are Aunt Bee and Sheriff Andy. In one of the later seasons, Aunt Bee has the opportunity to become a national spokesperson for a huge company that makes cleaning products. She's met the president, and he's very impressed by her genuineness and sincerity. She does a commercial for these products, and the sales jump because she's so sincere and honest in talking about how great these cleaning products are. So he says, Aunt Bee, I want to hire you
to be our national spokesperson. We're going to fly you around the country in a private jet. Because they conclude, based on the evidence, that American popular culture is now a cult of fame. A cult in which being famous is the most important thing. And this culture is embodied by Justin Bieber, Bruno Mars, Miley Cyrus. The converse is that if you are not rich and famous, then you are a loser. That is the relentless message of American popular culture right now. So a few years back, I had the privilege of speaking at Averroes High School, not real far from here, in Fremont. I shared a podium with Sheikh Alauddin al-Bakri. And Sheikh Alauddin talked about how, look, we are surrounded by stories of young people we know, neighbors. This kid went to high school nearby, and then he wrote this app and launched it. It went viral, and he just sold it for $30 million. Sheikh Alauddin asked us, what does this sentence mean? There is no God but God. I said, what does that mean? That's Sheikh Alauddin. He said, look, you live here, in the East Bay, surrounded by stories of young people who launched that startup, app went viral, and now they are rich. And the message your kid is immersed in is that's the goal. That's success. That's the ultimate. And Sheikh Alauddin said, I am here to tell you that that is a lie. American culture is pushing a falsehood. He said, I'm here to tell you there is no God but God. He said, it is not easy to be a parent in the United States today because your child is immersed in a culture of lies. That's Sheikh Alauddin. And that, I agree that that is the challenge. That I took this photograph in Times Square. Pepsi's slogan, live for now. Don't worry about the sugar, live for now. If it feels good, do it. Live for now. Whatever floats your boat. The hazard of American popular culture right now, the culture of kids who speak English at home, is that it deliberately undermines self-control, overvalues fame and wealth, devalues virtue and character, and devalues the family. So what are you supposed to do about it? As we wrap up. I began this morning by talking about how the bonds across generations have been broken. You must restore them. You must fight for supper at home. No devices at the dinner table, no screens on, no TVs on during mealtime. The benefits are huge. Frank Algar and his colleagues interviewed more than 10,000 adolescents coast to coast and asked them, in the last 7 days, how many evening meals have you had at home with a parent? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And then for each one of these 10,000 plus adolescents determined internalizing problems, like anxiety and depression, externalizing problems, like hitting the wall and anger, positive well-being, pro-social behavior, and life satisfaction, and found a huge effect. Not just going from 0 to 7, but almost every step along the way. Let's compare 5 evening meals at home with a parent to 6 evening meals at home with a parent. Going from 5 to 6, we see a significant decrease in internalizing problems, a significant decrease in externalizing problems, a significant increase in positive well-being, and in life satisfaction. And yet what has happened? In 1992, researchers interviewed teenagers and asked them, in the last 24 hours, have you had a meal at home with a parent? In 1992, 2/3 of teenagers said, yes, I have. In 2005, 2/3 of teenagers said, no, I have not. That's a huge change in a short period of time. You've got to fight for supper at home. And you know, I see so many parents who are picking up their kids from school, and then they're driving to soccer practice, and then they're driving to computer coding, and they're eating on the way from one activity to the next. And the unintended message those parents are sending is that relaxed time at home with family is the lowest priority, that it's way more important to be amazing and do all these activities. Don't send that message. That is the wrong message. No earbuds, no headsets in the car. Again, watching parents at car line, kid climbs in the car. First thing a lot of these kids do is put in earbuds. No earbuds, no headsets in the car. So my wife and I went to the new car dealer, and when the new car dealer found out we had a daughter, he was very excited and wanted us to sell us the rear seat entertainment system, and handed us this flyer. Let's take a look at this flyer. The two kids are wearing headsets looking at a screen. Mom is looking back at her kids, smiling as if to say, hey, this is great. We can drive to Los Angeles, never have to talk to my kids at all. What are we thinking? We're all in a hurry. There's not enough time. Time in the car is special. It's private time. When you're in the car, you should be listening to your daughter, and she should be listening to you, not to Miley Cyrus or Bruno Mars or Ariana Grande. No earbuds, no headsets in the car. And the bedroom. Researchers studying middle income and affluent families in the United States now find mother, father, son, and daughter return home, and within 5 minutes they're each in a different room of the house looking at a different screen. You cannot have a family life as the family is not physically together. Nothing in the child's bedroom but a bed. No video game consoles in the bedroom, no TV in the bedroom. That's the official guideline of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And you know, I've heard from so many parents how helpful this has been to them. I want you to know I practice what I preach. This is my living room. That's my father-in-law, the one with the dumb phone with his back to the fireplace. His wife, my mother-in-law, my wife, and my daughter. We have one TV set. When we watch TV, we watch together. We have a backyard. We grow vegetables. And here is my daughter transferring some of these plants from the smaller cup to the larger cup. Playing Parcheesi. Our group selfie. But going back to this, it costs nothing to do this. It costs nothing to say, we're going to have one TV, and when we watch television, we will watch as a family. And parents will say, yeah, but what about the evening news? I can't watch the evening news with my 8-year-old. I said, that's right. You don't need to watch the evening news. We watch Singing in the Rain. We watch An American in Paris. We watch The Sound of Music. When you're planning a vacation, and your daughter asks, can I bring my best friend along with me? The answer has to be no. Because if she brings her best friend along with her, it's going to be her and her friend going on the ride through the Haunted Mansion, and all you've done is to subsidize a very expensive play date. The point of the vacation is to strengthen the parent-child bond, to prioritize the family. In a culture that's all about same-age peer relations, How do you prioritize the family? You say vacations are just for family, are for strengthening the parent-child bond. So when you're in the haunted mansion, it's you and her in the haunted mansion. That's the point of the vacation. That's why you're doing it, to do fun stuff together. American parents are confused. So many of them say, well, I just wanted to be happy. For 18 years, I was an attending physician at Shady Grove Hospital in Rockville, Maryland. One night, I got a phone call from the ER. They wanted me to come in, but not to admit a patient as attending, just to sit with Mom. 15-year-old girl was a victim of sexual assault, and the mom was hysterical and didn't know anyone in the ER, had asked the ER to call me because I'd known the family for many years. So I came into the hospital really just to sit with Mom as the forensic exam on her daughter was concluded. And it was just Mom and me in the consultation room adjacent to the ER. When I walked in the room, it was just her and me. And Mom's first words to me, she said, I knew I shouldn't have let her go. She's 15 years old, it was a frat party at the college, I knew I should have let her go. And of course you want to shake Mom and say, well then why did you let her go? But I didn't say that because I knew the answer. She wants to be her daughter's best friend. And her daughter had assured her that she'd be fine, she'd stay with the other girls, they'd all have their phones. She just wants her daughter to be happy. If you're doing the right thing as a parent, you're going to do things that will make your child unhappy. It's part of your job. Occasionally you must do that. Better example comes from a mom I was talking to in Tampa, Florida. Her 14-year-old daughter came to her one day and said, hey, guess what? We're all going to Cancun for spring break. And Mom looked at her phone and said, well, I can't get away that week. I'm busy. And her daughter said, I didn't say you're going to Cancun, we're going to Cancun, me and all the other girls. Now this is a very affluent family. Mom couldn't claim they couldn't afford it, that wouldn't be believable. Mom said, Cancun, Mexico? That's where all the college men go on spring break. And you're 14, but you could easily pass for 18, and a young man's not going to ask for ID. I don't think it's safe. And her daughter said, oh, it's fine, it'll be totally safe, we'll stay together, we'll have our phones, we'll be fine. And her mom said, no, it's not safe. You're not going. And she told me her daughter exploded, started screaming at her. You're like totally ruined my whole life, I hate you, I hate you. And Mom said, well, to be honest, sometimes I'm not so fond of you either. She said, but I'm your mother, and that's a job. Like any job, it has a job description, and item 1 in my job description is, I have to keep you safe. And I know more than you do about the behavior of drunk 20-year-old men, and you're not going. If you're doing the right thing as a parent, you will have to do some things that makes your child very upset. That's part of your job. As I said, American parents are confused. They think they have to choose between being the tiger mom pushing their kid to achieve versus the Irish setter dad who just wants kid to have a good time. But that is a false dichotomy. Last chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, is titled The Meaning of Life. And what I say there is that part of your job is to give your child your understanding of the big picture. Why are we here? What is the meaning of human life? And it better be something better than getting into Stanford and earning a lot of money, because those answers will not satisfy. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. That's a robust empirical finding. Without that bigger context, without that meaning, there's no point. And working hard to get a good mark at school just becomes a race to nowhere, to borrow the title of a documentary making that point. And the result is anxiety,
depression, and disengagement. But you can't be the Irish Center dad letting kids do whatever they desire unless you have first educated desire. Because researchers find when you let American teens do whatever they desire, what most American girls most desire is social media, what most American boys most desire is video games. You've got to instill a longing for something better, higher, deeper than that. So when I meet with high school kids, I ask them, what's school for? What's the point? Most common answer American kids give is, well, it's to get into a good college. And I'll say, all right, what's college for? Why do you have to go to college? They say, get a good job. I say, all right, what do you need a good job for? They say, to earn lots of money. And I say, okay, what do you need lots of money for? And they'll say, to have fun. Duh, who invited this guy anyway? This is ridiculous. So, Dr. Wright invited me to come to his school, Shore, a independent school in Sydney, Australia. I spent 2 days at the school. And of course, we worked out in advance what the format would be, and that I was going to meet with students and ask them these questions, engage in this kind of conversation. And so, the day before I met with the students, he said, and I was in his study, he said, ask me the questions you're going to ask the students tomorrow. I said, all right, what's school for? And he said, school is preparation for life. And I answered him as I would answer a student if they said that. I said, all right, what's life for? And without hesitation, he said, human life is for 3 things. Meaningful work, a person to love, and a cause to embrace. I said, okay. That is an answer. I'm not saying it is the answer. But that's what an answer feels like. That answer has some meat on the bones. You need to give your child your answer to the big question. We began this morning with the question, why are American kids today so much more likely to be anxious, depressed, or disengaged compared to American kids a generation ago, compared to kids right now living in Switzerland or New Zealand? And what can we do about it? Here are my answers. The bonds across generations have been broken. But you must restore them. Fight for supper together. Family vacations. Prioritize the family. Cancel the play date. Make a family date instead. Same-age peers have displaced the family. But you must prioritize the family. Screens, social media, and video games have displaced real-world experience. But you must change that. You must limit, govern, and guide how your kids engage screens. You must help your kids to engage the real world. American culture now prioritizes fame and wealth over virtue and character. You must challenge that. You can't change Hollywood, but you can create a culture of respect and virtue in your home. Again, you'll find more of these points in my books, Why Gender Matters, Girls on the Edge, Boys Adrift, The Collapse of Parenting. All 4 of my books are available as audiobooks, shown here if you prefer to listen, if you've got long commutes. Translations are available in these 7 languages. If you found this message helpful and you know of another group that might benefit, I hope you'll come up and grab a business card and be in touch. The handout is online. The link is leonardsax.com/mcc.pdf. You must include the www and the .pdf. It is case sensitive and it is lowercase. Let's take a short bathroom break. And if you have any other questions, pass them forward or hand them to me. We'll resume in about 5 minutes, and the rest of our time together will be your questions. All right, so these are now questions that you have written and which I'm going to do my best to answer. Do violent television shows have the same impact on boys as violent video games? Excellent question, and
and a question which Craig Anderson and Doug Gentili address at some length in their work. So 40 years ago, there were parents who were very concerned about violent television. And there was a famous study 40 years ago, in the 1970s, where they interviewed men in prison. And they found that men convicted of violent crimes were more likely to watch violent television than men convicted of nonviolent crimes. And this was a big story 40 years ago, and led many people to say, see that? Violent television causes men to be violent. This is not true. An association does not prove causation, and this was what we call a snapshot study. This was not a longitudinal cohort study. It was one point in time, men in prison who'd been convicted of violent crimes, when they were allowed to watch whatever they wanted, chose to watch violent television. That does not at all show that watching violent television causes men to be violent. On the contrary, the error of causality probably goes in the other direction. Namely, that violent men prefer to entertain themselves by watching violent television. The violent television did not cause them to be violent. Their predilection for violence causes them to prefer violent television. And indeed, it turns out that watching violent television does not cause violent behavior. I am not endorsing violent television, and I certainly don't allow my daughter to watch violent television. But violent television does not cause violent behavior, nor does it change personality. I pointed out earlier today that violent video games do not cause boys to be violent, but over a year's time, violent video games will cause a boy to be less honest, less patient, and more selfish. That is a robust finding. Do we find similar effects for violent television? We do not. And Anderson and Gentili wonder, why is that? Why does playing violent video games change personality in a way that watching violent television does not change personality? And they answer their question. And they actually have two answers to that question. One is that it concerns the degree and kind of violence. So you watch a violent episode of The Sopranos, and okay, you might watch one actor pretend to shoot another actor, or two or three actors. In a violent video game, you might kill 10 people in 5 minutes. And furthermore, in many of the most popular violent video games, you're not just shooting them, you're dismembering them. You're torturing them to death. They're screaming for mercy while you hack their arms and legs off. This is common in some of the most popular video games in the United States. So it would be very unusual to find a show on network television where someone is tortured to death, having their arms and legs cut off, and then being slowly suffocated. In violent video games, that's not at all unusual. So that's the first point they make, is that the degree and kind of violence is much worse in violent video games than what you'll ever find on broadcast television. But they don't think that's the important point. The important point, the reason why violent video games change personality that watching violent television does not, in their judgment, this is Anderson and Gentili's conclusion. When you're watching a violent TV show, you're watching one actor pretend to hurt another actor. When you're playing a violent video game, you are pulling the trigger. You are stabbing with the knife. You're cutting off the body parts. And there's a great deal of research showing that when you do it yourself, it changes you in a way that watching someone else do it to someone else does not change you. So again, I'm not endorsing violent television, but I'm sharing the explanation that researchers have for why playing violent video games changes personality in a way that watching violent television does not change personality. Next question. Do you recommend that we share our notes from today with our boys? My son is 10 years old, he's pretty intellectual and wants to understand everything about everything. He also likes video games. So, it depends. But my short answer would be yes, absolutely. And I think it's useful because parents have told me it's useful. If you go home and say to your son, look, we attended this workshop today and we learned that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that you not play violent video games and that you not have a video game console in your bedroom. That goes over better than saying, hey, I decided I'm taking the video game console out of your bedroom. If you say, I'm taking the video game console out of your bedroom, your son's like, what did I do? Why am I being punished? If you say, look, I learned something today. And I learned that you're not supposed to have a video game console in your bedroom. You can hand your son your copy of Boys Adrift and ask him to read chapter 3 on video games. And a parent told me how her teenage son, after reading chapter 3, put on a pair of goggles, got a baseball bat, and destroyed his Xbox, hammered it to bits. Because he realized, you know what, that could be me. I could become that 28-year-old who's sitting in his. So let me quickly tell you that story. I'm pretty sure that's in Boys Adrift. So I'm talking to this young man, and I say, tell me about yourself. He said, well, I'm level 120. Do you know what that means? I said, yeah, I believe that's a reference to World of Warcraft. You have reached level 120 in World of Warcraft. He says, it means I'm the best there is. There is no level beyond level 120. I am guild master. Do you know what that means? I said, yeah, it means that you're master of a guild in World of Warcraft. He says, it means there are people in Liverpool, England, in Johannesburg, South Africa, in Singapore, who basically bow down to me because of what I did in the Battle of Azeroth. I said, yeah, but if I understand correctly, in the real world, you're living in your parents' home, you're not working, and you're not looking for work. And he said, yeah, I hear what you're saying. You're saying that accomplishment in the real world is more important than what I accomplished in World of Warcraft. And I said, yeah, I think that's a pretty fair statement of my position. There was no communication. He was not persuading me, and I was not persuading him. He's perfectly happy being level 120, being guild master in World of Warcraft. But in the real world, I said, do you have any friends? He said, I have hundreds of friends. I said, when's the last time you had a friend over and met with them face to face? He said, yeah, I hear what you're saying. You think friendships in the real world are more important than